All right. Hello, everyone. Another day, another discourse. Welcome back to the third episode of Drivers Discourse, a podcast featuring intense discussions on burning topics in video games, old and new. This time we're here with part two, episode three of our difficulty in video games topic discussion. And we talked a great deal about numerous angles to difficulty in video games. This time we hope to continue along that discussion and cover everything that we did not quite touch on in as much depth as we wanted to in the second episode. So, of course, I'm joined by fraufraw and Retrorage once again. What's up, guys? How are we feeling about difficulty just in general? Are you guys like pretty comfortable in this topic? Are we feeling like experts after the last time? Or, it's been a while. Of course, it's been a few months. Are we feeling a little rusty?
Yeah, it's been a while. Gotta get back into the grooves,
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Retrorage feeling pretty solid about this, or?
Yeah, r/Metroidvania is grinding my gears.
True. Yeah, we've had a little bit of practice getting our talking points in comprehensible form through our discourse with r/Metroidvania of late. Although personally I've become a bit jaded. So anyway, yeah, we have on the screen viewable right now. Of course, any of you that are watching through video, but we'll be able to see the whiteboard screen throughout the episode. And those of you watching through audio only, we really appreciate you as well. Again, thanks to everyone that's been tuning into the episodes. What we're currently looking at right now is showing the screenshot of everything that we wrote down on the whiteboard last time. We first tried to define just first principles, what is difficulty in video games, and we we came to pretty broad conclusions. Of course, naturally, this is a very dense topic. We talked about intentionality, we talked about execution, we talked about decision making, we talked about the ability to gather knowledge, we talked about the mental stack, we talked about player interest, which definitely has a non-trivial effect on how we approach difficulty. We talked about different degrees of difficulty that are represented in video games and try to represent this through a couple of difficulty matrices, including one that polarized difficulty and punishment, as well as one that honed in on knowledge, and finally one that primarily set its sights on execution. This time around, we hope to, again, continue the discussion along. We've got a matrix already prepared for kind of continuing along the discussion where we mentioned difficulty and punishment. This time as well, though, we're going to be talking about, and, I just want to be able to set the stage beforehand so that those of you that are watching in the beginning will be able to know exactly what we're going to be focusing on today. We're going to be trying to talk about more in-depth difficulty created through lack of accessibility features or lack of quality of life features. We also hope to talk about difficulty scaling and difficulty presented in single player versus multiplayer games. And finally, we hope to cover some additional things that my two other fellow podcasters had in mind, if it comes to mind. Yeah. So I guess we can start off with anything that we didn't quite touch on in full with regards to our difficulty matrices. So one thing I have in mind right off the bat, between the last episode and this one, I've had the pleasure, or rather lack thereof, of completing Sekiro blind playthrough. And that game has definitely reinforced my perspective further on these sorts of things. Of course, prior I had played Dark Souls 3 and Wuchang, both rather interesting games in their own right, but obviously it only helps to develop your perspective further through adjacently related games. So Sekiro was an interesting one for me. I do think it contributes very appropriately to both the difficulty and punishment ends of the spectrum. Honestly, I have thoughts of my own, and we can probably get into it. But I was kind of wondering, do we think that Sekiro's like phenomenon is directly in association with its perceived difficulty? Because this is something that was like a very pressing question for me. I saw in the big runback thread I made on r/Metroidvania, and I'll link that in the description, of course, that someone was mentioning that the success of games like Hollow Knight, Elden Ring, etc., were directly due to their incorporations of punishment features. I don't really agree with that, but at the same time, Sekiro is such a popular game, and there's no denying that in some part people do tend to love punishing themselves for whatever reason. Is that something that we can tie directly to its success, Sekiro?
You know, it's funny that you bring up that point, and that answer is absolutely not. Because Sekiro is one of the least punishing games there is. Least punishing. It gives you 2 lives. It gives you 2 lives, guys.
Yeah,
How is
true.
that game punishing? It gives you 4 lives if you stab people enough. How is that game punishing? Like, that guy's just talking, or whoever that person is, they're just talking out their booty cheeks. You know what I'm saying? If look at this graph here. There's this difficulty, low punisher, high punisher graph. If I put Sekiro is like here. Sekiro is in the middle of difficulty. Like, it's like okay, you know, it's got okay difficulty, and it's like absolutely not punishing. You move real quick. You have 2 lives. It's just absolute buffoonery, dude.
Yeah.
Punishment is what's making these games popular. No, the game's just fun to play. So you'll look over whatever negatives is, you know. The punishment, it's not that bad. If the game's fun, all those negative things about the game feel less bad because the game's fun, right?
Yeah.
Before Sekiro, you know, being a samurai and like slashing people and deflecting, that's cool. Player interest, being cool. Remember that player interest thing that we have up here?
Yep.
Oh, if the player's interesting or interested in the game, the more they're willing to put up with, right?
Yeah.
It's crazy someone would say that. Oh yeah, punishment is what makes these games. Are you kidding me, dude? Are you kidding me, man?
And well,
there aren't any like horrible backtracking in Sekiro, to be honest. So players don't really get punished for, you know, it could be frustrating, but yeah, at times, but it's definitely not like high on the punishment scale.
Yeah, and fraufraw, you're also someone that's played a great deal of the game, Sekiro, that is, and I know that even though you didn't necessarily like complete it per se, like you've played enough of it to have, I'd say, a wealth of thoughts on it.
The last boss, phase 2 or 3.
Yeah.
I mean, I basically finished the game, right?
I mean, yeah, for all intents and purposes. How would what would you say regarding like the phenomenon of Sekiro and whether it's related to its applying punishment to the player or not? Would you say those are related, or I guess just like how do you feel about like the difficulty conversation for Sekiro?
To be honestly, I just don't think the game is quote unquote difficult. Like I mentioned earlier, it can be punishing, right? You miss this one big move from a boss. It's more about pattern recognition for games like these. Most for Sekiro especially, right? But in other FromSoft games, you get punished because with backtracking, right? So and they're not necessarily more difficult because you just haven't seen the patterns yet, right? So
right,
yeah.
Okay, yeah, and I do think a lot of action games nowadays do try to create some level of interest in the player, like seeking to overcome the challenges they present through like having a roadblock that requires like a specific pattern memorization of what's going on. And sometimes the pattern memorization that's incentivized doesn't necessarily involve previously taught mechanics as much as the isolated pattern memorization that's required from that particular roadblock. And I'll give some examples. When you're fighting Corrupted Monk the first time, that is when you're fighting him in the Mibu village, I believe it's called. That fight does involve quite a bit of the things you learned up to that point in the game. And obviously you have to apply those things to the memorization of that boss's patterns. So I feel like that's like a 50-50 balance with pattern memorization and with your ability to apply the mechanics of the game, right? Whereas maybe the final boss, Ishin, right? When you fight him, obviously there's still an application of the things you've learned in the game, but those things are presented in much more of an isolated situation, since without memorizing the patterns, you can't really like cruise your way through that boss. Like you strictly have to memorize the patterns, and there's not really other ways to go about it. Like you don't have the crutch where you can maybe dodge or maybe Makiri counter to escape it. You do have to specifically memorize the patterns. Like you can't really go off of like just instinctual application of the mechanics. Now, obviously, it's not that much different from fighting Corrupted Monk in that regard, but how much more important pattern memorization is more important in the Ishin fight than in the Corrupted Monk fight, I would personally say. Now, why does this matter at all? Why am I bringing this up, right? It's important to recognize that there's certainly a subjective viewpoint on difficulty when you talk to different people. We've already established that in the first episode, that difficulty is subjective. But I think it being subjective is exactly why it is interesting to talk about, because I think a lot of people will see something that they're not able to beat right away as difficult, even if the actual involvement of like what's necessary to do to overcome that roadblock is not like that involved at all, right? Like, let's be real, for Sekiro, if even though it's an action game where you're required to make real-time judgments and stuff, like if you're able to memorize the patterns and you're very proficient at that, like it could become like a complete piece of cake. And I think a lot of people have expressed this exact sentiment, where Sekiro becomes incredibly easy on subsequent playthroughs after you've kind of gotten through the game's like initial knowledge barrier. But that first time, that especially those first couple of hours where you're playing the game, it feels like the hardest thing on the planet, right? Where all these things are just like trying to run over you, and you don't really have lots of time to process it. You don't even have that much of an HP pool. You don't have many flasks that can let you escape through it. Now, of course, you still have the revive that you're given, and you can still make great use of that to give yourself additional chances. You know, the second wins. And obviously, I'm not injecting my opinion on whether that initial part of the game is difficult. I'm just saying like the general sentiment on the game is that it gets easier on subsequent playthroughs, right? How do we feel about the idea that the game gets easier once you know the stuff, right? Because does that reveal anything profound about the game's innate difficulty, or is that just a natural part of any single video game that you play?
I mean, once a game clicks for you, it clicks, right? So I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing or a good thing, but
Mm.
yeah, it's just, if it clicks, it clicks.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
But I do understand how some people, some players, they aren't willing to like go through that, that phase of like revelation. They refuse to like, oh, I just don't want to do this puzzle. I refuse to fight this boss. The mechanics is too garbage, etc.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how a lot of modern gaming is like nowadays, and modern gamers.
Yeah, that's fair. Retrorage, you were gonna say?
well, I was gonna say, like, if a game is good, right, you'll like naturally learn how to play the game, right?
Yeah.
In my opinion, right? Like, that's why all fighting games are bad, because naturally learning how to play the game is just not. It's not there. It's not there for a person to be able to naturally pick up what to do in a fighting game.
Yeah, and
Right.
even with good tutorials and fighting games, right? It's just the skill for those games are just way too high.
I do think it's
Like,
yeah. Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, I do think it's interesting that for fighting games, people uniquely point out the knowledge gaps, or in the ability to like teach the player. Like all the resources within the game for teaching the player are quite poor. And games like League of Legends and Dota 2 have been able to get away with having extremely poor tutorialization since the dawn of time, right? Since these games basically released. Like League of Legends famously had effectively no tutorial for quite a while. And I think once they actually added, I don't remember the exact year they added it. I know it was shortly
Yeah,
before I
it
played.
didn't even have a sandbox mode until like many years in.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember it took them a while to even add like I can't remember exactly what they called it, but it's like basically a training mode where you can
Yeah.
use
I
cheats
don't.
basically.
I think that didn't happen until like what, post 2015 or something?
Yeah.
Like many years after its launch. Yeah.
Exactly. And somehow people, I mean, obviously people complained about the game not having a tutorial, but somehow that wasn't something that held the game back from being as popular as it was compared to fighting games. Whereas people keep saying like fighting games, what holds them back, tutorialization, right? Which again, I'm not saying either way of referring to these issues is valid or not, but it is interesting to point out that like, yeah, some other competitive multiplayer games have somehow gotten away with having very poor tutorialization. Dota 2 and its tutorialization was horrible for even longer than what it was for League of Legends. And a lot of the time, relying on community guides was actually put you in an even more awkward position because they were oftentimes out of date very quickly, or they didn't involve, or sorry, they didn't have enough detail in the descriptions. Like you follow the item guide, and you import it to the next games you use, so that you can just like click on whatever recommended item that you get from that guide. But oftentimes, again, they don't have an explanation tied to it, so you're just kind of following it blindly. You're not building that intuition for yourself. And you can't really blame Dota 2 for that specific thing because again, that's like from the community, right? But the game has to put the infrastructure in place for that to be possible in the first place. And if they're using that as a proxy for like proper tutorialization, then that goes to show like the intrinsic problems that are present there.
Well, I think that like for multiplayer, for example, we've been playing Deadlock recently,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I've never played the game, do any tutorials, but I actually diffused so much knowledge from just Thriller Junkie,
Mm-hmm.
like playing with him and watching a couple of his YouTube videos. I was able to like gain knowledge without any tutorial. The game provided me nothing. Nothing was provided by the game, but I was able to learn like some of the mechanics of the game just by playing with teammates, right?
Mm-hmm.
In a fighting game, like I feel like okay, if you watch noobs play versus like high level play, right? The gameplay is like completely different, right? But, like
Mm-hmm.
having to understand what's happening on like the high level is so much less intuitive than like a game like Deadlock or a game like League of Legends, right? In
Mm-hmm.
my opinion, where it's like, oh, in a fight game, if they're like shimmying, you just see the two pro players like shimmying around and like trying to like check buttons. Like you can't intuitively gain much knowledge from that. Versus me watching Thriller Junkie's video on Doorman, where he like carts somebody and it stuns them on the wall, and he has the bomb trailing towards them, so they're guaranteed to be hit because they're stunned, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then he shoots the bomb. Those are like things that like the knowledge can diffuse very easily, right? If, on top of your game not being very easy to learn, if that knowledge isn't very accessible or easily gleaned, it makes it doubly hard, right? Because why aren't fighting games getting the same love, right? You're right. There's League of Legends, Dota, all these games are super hard, but like nobody's ever saying, "Oh, League of Legends tutorial trash," right? It's because we all learn from our teammates or whatever, right? We
Yeah.
there's some.
Oh, sorry. But yeah, I
You
think
go.
this boils down to how, like, fundamentally they have a different kind of engagement level. Because fighting games, you're usually just engaging. You're either engaging with the opponents or engaging with yourself, right? But
Mm-hmm.
for team games, you got to think about yourself and you got to think about your teammates, and yeah. So I think it's easier to acquire. It's easier to learn in a group, basically, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you bring up a good point, both of you, on the fact that you can learn from teammates almost in real time. I think in fighting games you can do that to some extent, but you have to go more out of your way for it. Like you have to investigate replays. The replay takeover, as great as a feature as that is for the absolute most sweaty tryhards out there, right? Like the average gamer is not going to care about replay takeover. Let's be real. You have to be willing to improve, first of all. And second of all, you have to be willing to go out of your way to go to the replays and watch a replay, which is something that 99% of people don't even do, right? Like watching a replay, come on now. If I'm watching a replay, it's because like I'm sick, I'm goated, you're trash, and I want to show it off on my highlight reel video on YouTube, right? Like that's the only reason why I'm looking at my replays. I'm not looking at my replays to try to get better because I know I'm already good or something like that, right? I'm just speaking from the average competitive multiplayer gamer, right? Like most of the time, again, and there is somewhat of a shield in competitive multiplayer games, especially like the ones that are team based, because again, mm, even if you're bad, you can kind of protect yourself a little bit using your team as like a shield for a little bit. In a fighting game, all of your vulnerabilities are there in plain sight to be exploited by your opponent, and you look really bad when you get exploited. I mean, famously, people have a lot of shame when they get throw looped, even though everyone's mortal to it. That kind of thing.
No.
Yeah. So yeah, that's like kind of a sneak peek of something we want to explore further later on. I did want to bring up, since we're still trying to fill out this difficulty punishment matrix for things we didn't talk about. I did want to bring up as well another game which I didn't necessarily play recently. I had played the demo last year, but it's been a hot topic of ours within our circles for quite a while, for quite a few months, is Mio. And this game is a game with extremely high punishment, but interestingly enough, the punishment for this game is not something that is treated in the same way as some of these other games where there's punishment. Like in Sekiro, right? The punishment in Sekiro is you lose what is it, half your money, and you can't get it back at all. But money in Sekiro doesn't really matter that much, especially when you get better at the game. The better you get at the game, the less money matters. Whereas, and there's other punishment factors too, right? Like you have to manually retraverse and potentially kill the enemies that are along the way. But Sekiro, even for a game of its kind, is very tame in the punishment that it applies to the player. The supposed friction that applies to the player, because the save points are oftentimes close to the point of interest, whether it's the boss, whether it's the area of interest, things like that. Plenty of save points in that game in general. Mio, on the other hand, it doesn't punish you in a very, very refined way, I must say. Instead of saying like, oh, okay. I mean, it does make you lose money. You lose all your money when you die in that game. But you can crystallize the money at NPCs so that you don't lose any of it when you die. And turns out in Mio, money is not really used for that much to begin with, so you don't really care even when you lose all your money. But something that Mio famously has in terms of its punishment is long runbacks. And I'm not talking about runbacks where you gotta fight through these enemies that are sitting in your way in like a gauntlet style, like akin to how people talk about like Dark Souls 2 or some other older FromSoft games. No. I'm talking about taking a nice little stroll through the empty space, appreciating the scenery, watching as you bask in the wonderful music, right? Like, this is what I'm talking about. Like 1 minute of just holding left or holding right while you make your way back to whatever point of interest that you died at, whether it was a boss, whether it was a platforming sequence, whether it was an auto scroller, things like that, right? The game loves to apply those long, lovely runbacks to the player to make sure they know that they shouldn't make that mistake again, right? And how does the game excuse these punishment things that are applied? It excuses them by having these so-called assist features, right? And they're not really assist features. They're not really like your traditional accessibility difficulty sliders or whatever. They're basically they're these mods that you can equip to your character, akin to like a Hollow Knight charm, and they take up certain number of slots that allow you to have some special effects. So one of them allows you to recover health after standing on solid ground for I think 5 seconds or something like that. This is something that you'll commonly see players use for platforming segments because, otherwise for platforming segments, when you get hit on the spike or whatever, you have to restart from like some arbitrary checkpoint, which typically is they're typically not very generous with the checkpoints in these platforming segments. So you will be spending those extra 5 seconds to recover your health on top of the extra time that you're spending with the run back in those cases. And there's some other mods that help with like making it quote unquote easier for subsequent attempts after you die. So if you die to a boss, it'll apply a weakening to the boss, and that one I don't think is a mod in the same way as like the recovering health one. I think that one's like a straight up assist feature or something. And I think the one where you stand still and gain back like a temporary health is also an assist feature that you can apply in the game. But they have these things in the game to somewhat quote unquote excuse the otherwise just long, laborious, tedious, toilsome runbacks that they make you go through. And again, these runbacks are not even filled with anything that's a particular threat per se. It's really just holding left or holding right through empty space in a game that has extremely poor movement. And again, it withers away at you every time you have to do it because these just take a long time for no reason. And it's not like you're being particularly engaged or challenged along the way. You're just holding left, holding right, maybe jumping over an enemy that doesn't even do contact damage to you. And further means of this game for applying the punishment or the friction that these Redditors love to refer to it as is the game applying health reductions to you over the course of the game. They're called tremors. And they apply the tremor when you enter specific areas, and they're basically permanent health reductions. You can find HP ups when you explore, and I think you can find a number of them such that you can get 8. Correct me if I'm wrong on this, any of you that are in the comments. And 4 such tremors occur throughout the game. So, and because of this, it makes the platforming and it makes boss engagements even more it makes them take even longer because the health pool that you would have otherwise had is not available for you, so it makes the attempts take longer. Now, why am I bringing all of this up? Right? It sounds like I just like love hating on this game. No, there's a reason why I bring this up because it's a pretty great case study on a rather amateurish understanding of how to apply difficulty in your game. I think a lot of people that are on Reddit, when they approach the discussion around difficulty for Mio, they're not talking about any of these things I mentioned about the runbacks or whatever. They're talking about specifically the precision of the platforming, the fact that the detection on the pogo is not very lenient, which is something they fixed, by the way, in one of the updates given to the game. They talk about those things. They don't talk about, oh, this game has a 1 minute runback, so it's difficult, which is interesting. And why is this interesting, right? Whether this game had 1 minute runbacks or 5-second runbacks would not change how people feel about the, relatively tough precision platforming or whatnot. But it does change how people feel about the nature of the game's punishment and whether someone would be able to tolerate that or not, right? And I think that is very important to consider whenever you're discussing difficulty, because it goes to show how these things are still distinct from each other and that you can't really look at them in the same light. Something being difficult does not, or something being punishing does not imply that it is difficult, and also vice versa. I'm not sure if any of you had anything regarding Mio. I know that it's an exhausted topic by now, especially in our circles. So, of course, feel free to point out anything about Mio if you want.
I only saw that one clip you showed me.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yikes. No thanks.
Yeah. The clip that fraufraw was referring to is the 1 minute run back to Sol and Vin. And again, any of you that play that game will know exactly what I'm talking about. And that's a very pain point game in that particular game. Or I said pain point game. Pain point part of that particular game. And not for the right reasons, really. I'm not sure if anyone's really willing to defend the runbacks in Mio. Maybe overlook at most, but I don't think anyone I've seen is willing to defend it because, again, it doesn't really add to like the interesting parts of the game. Everyone that I've seen discuss Mio talks about the coolness of the platforming segments, which, to be fair, it's fine to have like intense platforming. It's a Metrovania, so personally, I'm not a fan of when Metrovanias distract themselves with kind of auxiliary things that don't directly relate to the exploration component, but it's up to the devs whether they want to apply those things or not. But when you have these deliberately frustrating and pointless, like, stretches of just walking simulator through empty space, to apply pressure on the player to not make those mistakes again, it just feels like a lack of respect and a lack of understanding of how difficulty is applied in these games. Because adding a 1 minute run back does not make the game any more or less difficult. It just makes it take more time to beat it. Which again, something taking more time does not necessarily imply it is more difficult, as we were talking about with Sekiro. Okay. Moving on from that. So any other particular examples that we had in mind? I mean, we again, last episode we covered a lot of different game examples for difficulty versus punishment right here. But do we have any other particular examples that we wanted to focus on before we shift gears?
I could bring up some IRL. Let's branch this out to IRL. Right?
Oh, okay. Yeah, sure.
So, I have a neighbor who's like a juggling master. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So I go out with this neighbor. We go to like some juggling thing. So we all juggle, right? And like I've been picking up juggling. So like I can do like 3 pins and like a couple of tricks with the pins, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I was thinking about it when we were, couple other day, I was thinking about, I was like, how does difficulty and punishment relate to juggling, right?
Mm-hmm.
So here's the context. So when you juggle 3 pins, right, and you're doing the juggling and you mess up, what happens?
They all fall down.
You
Right?
only have to pick up 3 pins.
Yeah, you only have to pick up 3 pins, right?
Mm-hmm.
The punishment is baked into the difficulty of juggling, right?
Mm-hmm.
If I wanted to do 4 pins, guess what? What do I have to do when I messed up juggling 4 pins?
Oh man, 4 to pick them up 4 now.
I gotta pick 4 pins up, right? So my crack neighbor, he can try to do 7 pins, or not 7 pins, sorry, like 5 pins, 6 pins maybe. And then when they juggle in groups, there's group juggling exists where they're juggling like 3 pins per person with like 8 people. Guess what happens when the pattern messes up on an 8-person like juggling shenanigans? Everybody be picking up 24 pins, right? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So like that's like I was thinking about that and I was like, oh, can this like relate to games, right? Because like the higher you go in juggling, it just inherently becomes more punishing, right? If you go from 3 to 4 to 5 to 6 to 7 jugglings, not only does the punishment of messing up, like you have to go around, pick up the 7 things that you threw all over the place, right? But setting up the juggle is also way harder, right? Because you have to hold. Can you imagine holding 7 pins in your hand? Like I was watching my neighbor, and like the way he has to start off the juggle, it's like insane. Like it's like the whole technique in itself to start a 5 pin juggle with his hands, right? Because the pins are just so big, right? And you have to hold them in like a very specific way. So not only it's like the speedrunning thing. Imagine if every time you had to restart a speedrun, you had to do all these XYZ things to like go back and restart, right? Juggling is exactly like that. It's like doing 10 more push-ups every time you mess up, right? Every pin you increase, right? On your road to becoming a juggling master. So I was thinking, it was just an interesting thing I was thinking about. I was like, is there like a game like direct version where like as you try to like advance in the game, things it's like actually connected. Like the difficulty and the punishment here are like inherently connected in juggling, right? As you try to increase the amount of things you're trying to juggle, the punishment also increases, right? You have to pick up more pins. You have to set it up every time. The time it takes to set up the juggle takes more time, right? I was thinking, is there like a video game equivalent, right? And I was thinking about it, and I couldn't really come up with one. And maybe I was just throwing this idea out if you guys, are
That's actually one of the
interested by it.
topic that I sent to Kyuchi
Yeah.
about like adaptive difficulty. Yeah.
Yeah. Fraufraw, feel free if you want. If you have anything regarding that, feel free to bring it up.
Okay. Well, so recently I finished a little game called Resident Evil Requiem, and the action section of the game also like they also inherited some of the difficulty mechanics from the previous games, which is adaptive difficulty. So basically, what it means is like if you're using a gun and you're very low on ammo, and you start killing enemies with it, the game will try to drop more ammos of that specific type for you. Or if you're low on health and if you don't have any healing items with you, it will do the same. Like it will start dropping healing items for you as you struggle through the game. Conversely, if you're doing really well, if you're very stocked up on ammo and ammunitions and healing items, enemies will barely drop anything, or they will just give you like a few ammos at most to compensate you. Yeah. So what do you guys think about a system like that?
Yeah, that's very interesting. Funny enough about the ammo thing with dropping from enemies, Retrorage, I coerced him into playing Nestroid, the very first Metroid game that was released in 1986. And in that game, certain enemies will not drop any more either missiles or health after a long enough time of farming enemy drops from them until you re-exit and re-enter the room. It's not really like adaptive difficulty in that same regard, but what's funny in that game is that sometimes, even though you already have maximum missiles, you'll still get missile drops instead of the health drops that you would want. And I don't think it's tied to anything in particular. It's just sometimes the game is funny about that. They just never locked the ability to get missile drops when you already have max missiles by that point, which is not, honestly, that's not a profound difficulty element. That's just kind of makes you just take more time farming. But farming in and of itself in Nestroid is non-trivial. So that's the problem. It's not difficult because it takes longer. It's difficult because of the circumstances in which you're farming. Like a lot of the time you're farming in a kind of precise 1 block or 2 block space where below you there's lava, and to both sides of you there's like enemies charging at you from either side of the screen. And again, that's what kind of creates the difficulty setting, but not necessarily the fact that you have to farm longer. The farm longer part obviously contributes, but it's not the inherent component of it. But yeah, I like that. That's like kind of what came to mind immediately when you were talking about that. I think there was something that came to mind when you mentioned the adaptive difficulty, and it escapes me now.
You can't turn it off in Requiem, right? It's like forced on.
No, it's
like
baked in. You got to use mods
Yeah.
to Or what happens is, for example, in the remake version of Resident Evil 2, what happens is that if you choose the hardest difficulty, for example, they have like different tiers of adaptive difficulty adaptation baked into the game itself. So for example, if you play on the hardest difficulty, there will still have there's still difficulty adaptation, but the curve for that is very small compared to like normal or assisted level, for example. So what happens in that game is I actually enjoy the difficulty adaptation in RE2 Remake because it's not as noticeable as your other games. As well, using Requiem, for example, the latest release from Capcom, you can see it's pretty tangible. Like you can kind of feel the difficulty adaptation because you can just see more ammo dropping, more health dropping as you struggle more and more, right? But in RE2, it's you can't really see that because the difficulty adaptation is baked in a way like how you deal damage to the monster and how much damage the zombies deal to you, basically. So I think what they do is like how it's calculated is based on like if you miss more shots, it lowers the difficulty curve, and if you are lower on health or if you get bitten more, like that also lowers it. Yeah, but if you're more resourceful, like if you have better item management, you have more resource, and if you hit your shots all the time, then the zombies could like deal more damage to you, basically. Yeah, so one bite sometimes. So that's why sometimes in that game, if you get bitten by a zombie, sometimes it will take your health to danger level right away. But sometimes you'll still be fine. So which is kind of weird, but it's something very hard to notice.
Wow. Yeah, that that's kind of brutal. So I guess in like a speedrun context, like manipulating the difficulty like adaptivity level would be non-trivial, right? Like or do
Yeah,
you
yeah,
think
yeah. I've
Hmm.
actually seen and heard people were actually like just with some shots to bring down the level, and so they would be able to like get through this section. Yeah.
Yeah, wow. I mean, that's pretty
But
crazy.
that's
Like
something but that's something obviously only for the for the sweats and for the professionals, right?
yeah, for
Like
sure.
yeah, it's something hard for like normal people, like your average player to notice, which is something I definitely enjoy because the survival horror element is really pronounced in that way, like compared to like your other more actiony like entries in like RE4 or RE the actiony part of RE Requiem, because you can just feel it. Oh, I'm doing poorly, but also the game gives me more ammo and health. That kind of just okay. I mean, it's a game about shooting zombies. There's no immersion to begin with, but there's still like some level of immersion that needs to be involved, right? For any game. Yeah.
Right, for sure. Yeah, I mean that is compelling. And that point about immersion, and I feel like we can definitely touch on this immersion topic in future episodes as well. But just the idea that your game can still be immersive while having features that engage the player a lot and compel them to have interest in like getting better at the mechanics that you're stressing are important in the game can be done
Yeah.
while still
Mhm.
creating that immersion. So it's really cool. Um, yeah. So something came to mind when I was looking at our other matrix here, and this one we can fill out as well as we go along. Zexion. Zexion is a game for those of you Metroidvania fans. Zexion's a game that was released last year, but has been getting rather solid word of mouth as of late. And I know that fellow Metroidvania streamer Jupiter Climb did a playthrough of it recently and gave lots of positive comments on it. That game is a game that I think most people would agree is pretty difficult, especially with the execution demands. And it's not like a matter of it's an older school inspired game, so it's going to be difficult just by its virtue. No, 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 no. This game is inspired by those old school games, but has so many modern quality of life features, yet people still say it's difficult. And guess what? When you incorporate quality of life features in a game that's already pretty fundamentally sound, these quality of life features do not at all interfere with the nature of the game's difficulty, which is something I want to stress right in this episode. So we're gonna place that accordingly. This game, I've not played it personally. I've just only watched gameplay, so please understand that contextually in advance. But with that being said, if based on what I've watched, and I'll add this disclaimer in parentheses, based on what I watch, um, this game seems difficult because some of the bosses definitely have shoot 'em up or shmup inspired patterns, bullet patterns, but you're not given like shmup and shmup style movement. You're given like platformer movement. You're like your standard platform movement. Over the course of the game, you get upgrades to your movement that allow you to move more nimbly, especially in the air. But you have to deal with like the limited movement in the early portions of the game. Yet this game still gives you great quality of life features such as the ability to respawn just outside of the boss as a checkpoint. And they give you the option when you die, you can respawn right at the boss or you can respawn at the last used save point. And furthermore, they have other assist options such as save states, such as the ability to, I believe, give yourself more HP or something like that, giving yourself more ammo, I believe. They have like so many great quality of life features, and you can use them if you want, or you can decide, and of course, you can decide how much you want to make use of them, or you can just decide to play the game as is, and punish yourself if you want just by doing the run back every time. But the fact that they give you those options, I think, does a great job of making sure not to alienate the players that would prefer to have an accelerated experience while still getting all the enjoyment they can out of the game, compared to the players that would maybe prefer like an older school adjacent experience where you have to do all these run backs and stuff manually. So we can place this game accordingly on the punishment matrix as well, because I think that's appropriate. Like this game has like the maximum quality of life basically, and over here it would have modular punishment, so we can just put it in the middle. Actually, no, we can put it lower because, realistically, is anyone going to punish themselves since the options are there not to? We can say no punishment, basically. Because there's no reason to not use them. I mean, I feel like if you're using them when they're there, or if you're using if you're not using the not punishing features when they're there, then you're just crazy. Like, obviously, you could do what you want, play the game how you want. Right? I'm just giving my opinion, but it's like you're insane if you do the runbacks manually every time without respawning at the checkpoints. Which again, I think that goes to show that when the options are there, people will use them, and all this stuff about I love the runbacks, or the runbacks are what make me enjoy the game. It's just absolute cope. Absolute cope. I do want to play this game eventually, Zexion, that is, but backlog is kind of suffering right now, so it might be a while. All right. So we've touched on that. Actually, this is a good segue into just accessibility in general. So I had this as a topic for today, difficulty due to accessibility features or difficulty due to quality of life features, right? What is accessibility in the first place? How would we define accessibility, you guys?
Player options is probably baked in there. There's a lot of player options, customizability, right? Adaptive difficulty is actually pretty neat. Now that fraufraw mentioned, I'm like, wow, yeah, adaptive. Capcom kind of cooks with the RE. That's why RE has been so goated. They never miss with the RE releases because that game is like they're just cooking sauce.
Yeah. This is why I especially enjoyed RE2 Remake, because even without bullets, right, you can try to like maneuver your way out, like from the zombies. So, or you can shoot your way out, or you can just maneuver your way out, or you can do some in betweens, and they're just you have options, right? So that's why I really like the game. But whereas in some of the later ones, uh, they pretty much want you to just shoot your way out.
If you guys see the graph here that I've made for RE Requiem,
Yeah, I like it.
I actually think this is the ideal difficulty punishment graph, right?
Yeah.
So it's like like an inverse bell curve, where the left is for like players who struggle, but they have low, like the game gives them low punishment, right? They struggle and there's low punishment because they get ammo and health. But as you get better, like it becomes like a kind of like a middling thing where it's kind of difficult and there's not really any punishment at all. It's just difficult. It's like in the middle. And then as you get better at the game, it becomes more difficult and higher punishment. But you're better at the game, so like it's fair, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, dang, they're kind of cooking. This bell curve on the graph, kind of cooking, right? And then I also added juggling, where juggling is kind of like linear. Maybe not linear. Maybe it's like more a little bit because it gets exponentially harder the higher pins or things that you try to juggle. So maybe it's more like that, a little more like this, right? But yeah, juggling follows a similar line, right?
Yeah, I think actually, I think we can add speedrunning to that. This is what I was gonna bring up when you mentioned juggling. The better you get at speedruns, the more likely you are to go for harder tricks, right? This is just speedrunning in general. Like, obviously, I can't include every single speedrunning game into this, like just like with 100% certainty, but just like as a general idea, speedruns generally.
You can manipulate the one I put here. Yeah.
Oh yeah. How do I do it? Do I just click on?
You just click the box and then you click on the arrow.
Okay, got it. So speedrunning in general, like let's say you're kind of starting out with speedruns, right? You go for maybe safer strats. The safer strats won't lose you that much time if you mess them up, but they're also not hard to mess up, right? So low punishment, low difficulty, supposedly, right? Obviously, getting your first run finished is still pretty tough, and that's why speedruns are interesting in their own right. It's like basically how tough is that first run to get. But after you get that first run, you want to start improving your time, and the ability to improve your time diminishes as you get better because you'll go for harder strats, and those harder strats will cost a lot more time when you mess them up. There's actually an example in Afterimage that we've been talking about recently, Robbo and I, with this basically there's this jump in the beginning of Whispering Forest that you can do off a rat, and if you land this jump, it saves maybe, we don't know exactly how much time it saves, but like if I had to estimate, maybe 5 seconds. But then if you mess it up, you lose like 10 seconds having to go back down to the platform where you actually would normally use to jump up rather than jumping off the rat. And that 10 seconds lost is including the time spent on attempting the long jump that you would do normally off the rat. So that sort of thing occurs more and more the better you get at a speedrun. And there are other games where this is especially more the case, like in a Super Metroid. There are plenty of times where, let's say you miss, there's a famous jump actually that's done in the room the speedrunners call the moat, and the jump is called continuous wall jump, or CWJ, and it's like a 2 frame into 1 frame, I think, something like that. Like, again, I'm not like a Super Metroid expert, so if I'm wrong on that, feel free to correct me in the comments. But basically, tough jump, right? And if you mess up the jump, you can go for another difficult trick to save your run, but it obviously won't save you time because it takes longer to back yourself up. And if you get that backup trick correctly, you can continue the run, but you've lost so much time by then, right? And then let's say you mess up the backup as well. Well, there's a couple ways to mess up the backup. You can mess up the backup in a way where you can still attempt the backup again, but again, you've lost even more time because you have to reattempt the backup. Or you mess up the backup in a way where your run is completely dead because you fall in the water and you lose way too much time, right? Like by then you're losing like multiple tens of seconds, and you probably just will want to reset the run at that point. And that's a trick that you'll usually see done in the Phantoon Ridley Kraid Dragon route, which is the quote unquote more optimal route for Super Metroid 90%. And again, that's just like a prime example of the better you get, the more punishing the run becomes, because you go for harder tricks, and when you mess up those harder tricks, you lose even more time than the safer trick, even though the safer trick is slower if you get it compared to getting the harder trick. So there's just numerous ways for games to be difficult or punishing in this regard, but given that there is a correlation, we can agree that the correlation does matter and is significant, but correlation doesn't imply that they're exactly the same. They're still distinct from each other. And in fact, I don't even think the correlation is that strong, because the correlation depends on the very game that we're talking about, or even the very activity that's involved, because we can see that with juggling, the correlation is very strong, whereas with some of these other games, there's not even a correlation at all. All right.
Yeah, I think it just goes to show that they're like independent, right? But they can be related. Like at their core, they're independent.
Yeah.
It's possible that they can depend on each other.
Exactly.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
So, I hope the r/Metroidvania really critical thinking, like that gets injected into their minds.
Yeah. Exactly. Also,
I don't think that's a subjective idea. I think it is objective that difficulty and punishment are independent of each other.
Yeah.
Right? That's just a thing that is like fact.
Yeah.
Fact.
If you go off the definitions of the words, the English language words, they're literally different. They're just not just different, they're distinct. Like, there's obviously something could be different, but still be related, which there can be relationship, as the Retrorage said, but that doesn't mean they are always tied to the same thing. I mean, even among different disciplines, they're not necessarily tied to the same thing. So anyway, so I think that's a good framework for how we want to talk about like accessibility things, because again, these accessibility features, whether they improve a game or not, is not really something that we want to get into today. It's how they affect the difficulty or perceived difficulty, right? So a couple of games, such as fighting games, as is being typed right now, have famously poor accessibility features, and it's only been like recently that the accessibility features are getting better, to be honest. What do we mean by poor accessibility features? I'm not talking about motion inputs or not motion inputs. No, I'm talking about, does the game tell you the move list? Does the game have information on how to learn the game within the game? Does the game have the ability to? Does the game even have a training mode, for that matter? Because that is an accessibility feature. Does the game have the ability to use save states in training mode? Does the game offer like a starting point for learning combos, like in the combo trial mode or in its tutorial, for that matter? Does the game show you frame by frame input display, right? Because that, unfortunately, that is kind of a recent development, and not every game has had frame by frame input display for forever. Does the game even have frame data within the game, for that matter? Like, it's funny how these accessibility features are actually tied to quality of life for fighting games, and I think for some other games, people wouldn't even consider these things necessarily the same thing. But it's funny that in fighting games specifically, these accessibility features are quality of life. So I bring this up because if you contrast fighting games with like your average single player game, accessibility features are very different from quality of life. Accessibility features can be, does the game allow you to adjust the sensitivity of your camera rotation, right? Which does matter. Like, you guys think that, oh, this is like a very like inconsequential thing, like superficial thing. No, this type of thing does matter. In FPS is famously, your sensitivity being able to be adjusted allows for players to get comfortable in the way they want to play, you know? Does the game have difficulty options, right? And I don't mean like adaptive difficulty, like RE Requiem, what fraufraw was talking about earlier, but I mean more so, can you select the difficulty before you start your save, or even change it while you're playing the game? Or for that matter, does it have sliders, like what Prince of Persia Lost Crown has, like with what some other modern games have as well? Difficulty sliders where you can adjust the amount of damage taken, you can adjust the parry window. Yeah, Lost Crown has these things, and it's pretty crazy. Like, you can adjust the parry window, you can adjust the amount of damage taken, the amount of damage you deal.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
It is, right? And it's funny that these particular accessibility features are things that some developers will just straight up incorporate into higher difficulties by default. And that's what we've talked about it before in the first part of our difficulty discussion in episode 2. But some developers will straight up just increase the numbers at higher difficulties, right? They'll just pump up the numbers, like, you know, in Slay the Spire Ascension, higher ascensions, the enemies will just have higher HP or higher damage, right? And it'll kind of force you into certain builds. For Lost Crown, instead of making those like quote unquote the higher difficulties, they just make them sliders. And obviously the higher difficulty presets will by default have certain values for those sliders. But the higher difficulty presets are just that. They're just presets. And they're just presets for the accessibility features that I just mentioned. So it's pretty cool. There's definitely lots of lovely angles you can take with accessibility. I kind of wish that more games toyed with the idea of accessibility options without thinking that they would make sacrifices in their fundamental game design. Because if you are confident, if you believe in your game design, no matter what accessibility features you add that are at least reasonable to add, like when I say reasonable to add, I mean things that the player would be willing to use, right? That those features shouldn't interfere with your game if your game has a solid ground to stand on. What are our thoughts on like these kinds of accessibility features? Do they belong? Like, first of all, is it relevant to difficulty discussion? And second of all, do they belong in modern games?
I've been adding to the infographic.
Yeah.
You know, this vector feature. You know what? I'm gonna do a little tangent, but this whiteboard for online collaboration, guys, I'm gonna plug it in right now. Not sponsored, but this is a great piece of software. Oh my goodness.
No, it's great. Yeah.
Like the amount of feet, dude. I'm getting like, I'm like, it's like playing a game where I'm like learning new things, and I'm like, wow, this is so good. It's like if fighting games were actually good, and I was like learning as I was playing. All this vector stuff I've been doing. I'm like, wow, I discovered it, and I'm like, now I'm engaging with the game that is whiteboard for online collaboration. Like this is how it's supposed to be. That's how you know this is good. Is when I'm like exploring willingly without being told in a tutorial or like anything like that. I'm like willingly exploring the game that is whiteboard for online collaboration. That's the plug, guys. Go out and use this software. It's great. Oh
Yeah.
my goodness. All right, back to what we were talking about.
Yep.
So I think emulators are like a great thing to like talk about here. With
Hmm.
like most emulators giving all the quality of life. You can speed up the game, you can slow down the game, you can save state, you can like freeze the game whenever you want. You can literally do whatever you want. You want to manipulate the memory, you might have to go look at some documentation to do that, but you could do it, right? You can
Hmm.
turn on cheats. You can put in modded versions of the game. No one heard me say that. I'm not saying you should do that, but like I think this scale on the right, since you mentioned Prince of Persia, this
Hmm.
is the best scale for video games, right? Where
Yep.
you can make the game as difficult as you want it to be, or you can make it as easy as you want it to be,
Yeah.
right? So I could imagine for those of you not, only listening with the audio, there's like a slider here. I've drawn like this vector on the right where it's like lacking of quality of life on the left, full of quality of life on the right, and then like it's like a 2D graph, and difficult on the top and not difficult on the bottom, right? And in my opinion, ideally, you want your game to fall under the right side, which is full of quality of life, and be able to be slided down or up depending on what the player wants to do, right? So like for emulators, you can if you save state, if you freeze, if you slow down, if you do perfect inputs, if you task, you can make the game as easy as you want it to be, right? But you can
Hmm.
also play the game normally and then have it be in like the middle difficulty. Or you can make the game really hard for all you care. I don't think emulators really can make the game harder. I'm not sure. So I'll put that like right here. But like for
Hmm.
Prince of Persia Lost Crown, where you're saying, oh, you can make it so that the parry window is smaller, right? That makes
Yep.
it more difficult, right? So it is able to like move up on this slider. I think that's the way. That's the way, guys. That's the way.
Yeah. I think and it's interesting too because I know that some of these things that are accessibility are also quality of life features, but accessibility in its purest form is something that I would hope all gamers are in favor of because again, it only increases the range of audience that can play your games. Like, there's plenty of people that like okay, for example, having audio that is really crisp and smooth that allows people that are uh able to play through hearing only to be able to play it and still enjoy it, right? um that matters a lot. And if you have audio options in the game, like how you can change like maybe it goes beyond just having like voice volume or sound effects volume or other things like that, because those are accessibility features as well. But maybe it goes beyond that and you have sound effects for you have a wide range of sound effects. Like you have sound effects specific to the different weapons. You have sound effects for landing. I know that Soten has different sound effect when you do a hard landing versus when you just land on the ground normally. And sometimes it doesn't even have a sound effect at all. Sometimes there's a sound effect for, or not sometimes, but there's also sound effects for like when you open the door and when you collect the life max items or whatnot, or when you collect the drop. Like all these things like are accessibility features, and it's
Yeah,
interesting. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
that's something Street Fighter 6 has. It has a range like indicator for blind people.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's awesome.
like you can hear the beeps as your enemy is closer to you.
Wow, yeah. No, I mean those things are great. Again, those things could only increase the range of audience that plays your game. So I believe them to be beneficial overall. And I know some people are anti-accessibility, like no, no, no. You got to play the game at exactly one setting that the developer envisions, and you got to play it like this. I know people are pretty diehard defenders when it comes to games that don't have accessibility options. Just play the developer's vision, get good. But I think again, these things can only benefit a game. They can't hurt it. And if they're hurting the game, the game's got problems. Simple as that. Quality of life on the other hand. Let's talk about what quality of life is. Quality of life, I believe to be things. Again, I believe them to be things that can only improve a game, but it's not really there for accessibility. It's there for making the game smoother to get through, smoother to play, usually. So it might not have the same goals as accessibility per se. Obviously, quality of life can still increase the audience that can play your game, but it's there typically to make it smoother. So, for example, fast travel, which eliminates time that would otherwise be taken to manually travel through the game, right? So it reduces the amount of time taken to get through things. Something else like instant respawns instead of having to wait for a loading time to respawn. That's not accessibility, obviously. That's just quality of life. Something or a game that has instant respawns is it's a game I played recently. Oh my goodness. It escapes me right now. But I know that games like Wuchong make you go through a long loading screen every time you die, and that unfortunately is bad quality of life, right? It would be much better if they optimized the game so that you can instantly respawn. And some people say, oh, that takes away from the friction. You gotta feel the weight and tension of when you die, and that loading screen does so. And power to you, I guess, if you believe that. But at the end of the day, the quality of life feature of being able to instantly load back in is only beneficial to the game. And if it takes away from the game, again, that is the game problem. Tekken 7, with its absurdly long loading screens when you do a rematch. Even when you do a rematch with someone you just fought, you fight them again, you have to go through the get ready for the next battle, and you have to sit there on the character versus screen for quite a while the game loads back in. And that one, again, there's no good reason for the game to do so. It would only make the game better if the load times were faster or if the rematch took you right back in the game. Street Fighter 6, mind you, has the instant rematch, literally instant rematch. You press rematch, the other person presses rematch, you're right back in the game right off the bat. You don't even have to skip any intro cutscenes or anything like that. I mean, you can, but you're just literally right back in the game. Another quality of life feature, the ability to hold the pause, right? In a tournament setting, people oftentimes accidentally pause the game, and it really sucks because it ruins the flow of that match, and sometimes it causes controversies with how it should be resolved based on which person was responsible, right? But hold the pause gets rid of the accidents that happen and makes sure that the match can be played out more smoothly without like an interruption like that. So it's a great quality of life feature. Save states, we've mentioned this already. If save states take away from the game, that is a problem with the game. People, for some reason, seem very averse to save states in a lot of these perceived difficult games, like the modern From Software games or the Hollow Knights or the Silksongs of the world, things like that, right? If having save states in such a game is, so repulsive to the sanctity of the immersion or whatnot, I'm not saying the developers need to include it per se, but I'm saying if that takes away from the enjoyment of the game, it just doesn't make any sense. It shouldn't really, because again, it can only broaden the number of people that can potentially enjoy your game. And it's clear that the demand, or not, maybe demand is not the right word, but it's clear that the opportunity is ripe for it because a lot of people have made use of mods that like include save states for checkpointing right before a boss or right before a gauntlet, or at maybe potentially various points of a platforming section or what have you. If the player wants to use them, why not let them use them? Save states in fighting games for being able to do combos at certain points and practice them. That would have been so nice to have for KOF 13 because you have to endure the pointlessly long run back within your combo. When you want to practice on specific sections of the combo, you can't do that because sometimes the earlier part of the combo sets up very specifically how the rest of the combo is done, and you can't practice that latter part of the combo in isolation. So you basically have to learn it incrementally like a speedrunner, which is not really necessary. it doesn't really make it doesn't add that much profound to like the combo trial modes in KOF 13. We can go on and on about the quality of life features that games have nowadays. Actually, no, a recent game I played, Rune Factory Guardians of Ozma. This game has fast travel and it's beautiful. It's almost literally instant. Like you click a point on the map, as long as you've been nearby that point on the map already, you can travel to it. And when you travel to it, it takes you there almost immediately because the game is pretty decently optimized. It's wonderful. And that's a game with a relatively big world. So having to manually travel it wouldn't really add anything profound. It would just be padding. And that's a kind of amateurish game development integration if you're just adding stuff just for padding. But we typically see those things in open world games. So what a shame. Anyway, any further thoughts on quality of life? Like, have you guys seen quality of life features you thought were like, wow, this is kind of life changing, or you wish that other games would incorporate?
When you mentioned save state, I immediately thought about Resident Evil again because
Oh, nice.
Because they have like two different difficulties right away. Aside from the easy mode, there's one that's modern mode that just lets you save like whenever. But there's another one. It's called the classic mode, which is like for the purists and for the people who grew up with Resident Evil. Because in Resident Evil, when in old Resident Evil games, when you're trying to save, you need to consume an item called ink ribbons. So it's all part. It plays into the whole like resource management thing that Resident Evil has. So, but they don't force people to like play that mode. There's another. They have a modern mode to to just let people save whenever they want. So yeah, like it's just funny how you brought up save states.
Oh, for sure. No, I mean that's awesome. Again, like I'm sure people that would want those things appreciate having it because it's not like Resident Evil needs to be some like inaccessible game to satiate the people that love bragging about their achievements in video games.
Yeah. Like definitely like the minorities are just they tend to be louder on things like these, right?
Right.
Which also reminds me another thing that the Resident Evil 4 remake did that some people like some purists actually complain about is inventory auto sort. Like I can't believe people actually complain about that, Yeah, people are saying like, oh, but resource management, I want to like move my own things, I want to make my own inventory work, but it's like it's not like just don't use this, just don't use the auto sort then, right?
Wow. Yeah, I mean that's dude, classic. I mean, that dude, nowadays I swear, like if someone out there like is suddenly not able to feel like good about themselves for beating the game under the condition they beat it, then they'll complain about a feature that only benefits the game. Just baffling, dude. The game I finished recently, Valkyrie Profile 2 Silmeria, dude. Those menus are just. I was just thinking of the word friction while I was playing those games, while playing that game because I could feel the friction of navigating those menus, dude. Every time I was trying to look for the thing I wanted to look for, I felt like I had to scroll through like most of my accessories to find the exact thing. And you can't you can sort the accessories in the menu, the respective menu, but the sorting is way insufficient. You can sort by, let's say, the type of accessory, but then you can't sort it also alphabetically. You can only sort alphabetically or by the type. So if you want to look for the thing by the letter, you have to just sort alphabetically and scroll through maybe half. Like you have to do basically a linear search. Like you have to scroll through probably half of the accessories to find exactly what you're looking for. I mean, obviously, like for alphabetically, you can do binary search theoretically, but that's only as effective as the page scrolling lets you scroll through it. Again, something that can only benefit the game is having better sorting, right? A better quality of life. And it's funny because I feel like the first game actually did quite fine with the menus, and the second game, Valkyrie Profile 2, kind of dropped the ball on that. Retrorage, anything you got? Quality of life?
Yeah, so Nintendo games, on the Nintendo games front, I put on the chart that Nintendo games are the maximum FPE company, dude. Nintendo, they don't give a crap. They don't give a crap. You're playing the game the way the developers envisioned it, no matter what, dude. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, you pick up a Nintendo game, dude, by golly gee, you want to do anything? Nah, the answer is no. You know what I'm saying? But you know what? Nintendo gets away with it. Why? Why does Nintendo get away with it? Because look on the graph. Look on the graph, guys.
Yep.
Where Nintendo is on this graph, where difficult to non-difficult. Almost every single Nintendo game is playable, right? For the most part. Like,
Yep.
by the majority of your average gamer, even your average casual gamer
Hmm.
can play a Nintendo game. So this FPE or lacking of quality of life, this forced player experience, most people don't even think about it, right? They don't think about it because they never run into any of this goaded friction of r/Metroidvania, this high quality friction that like they need to like boost their ego, dude. I'm gonna do some personal attacks here, dude. Nintendo games don't have any of that, right? So no person is like, dang, I'm playing my, my Super Mario game. I'm like, I kind of want to change the controls of my Super Mario game. Nah, nobody's saying that. No one's running into the big Nintendo games are play tested so much that like the game is so streamlined that they want you not to think of anything like that,
That's true.
right? They make their games so that no player is like sitting there thinking, "Man, I should rebind jump to B or R or X or Y, right? Or R button 3." Like, nah, not happening. But and you compare that to other companies like Sony Xbox, for the most part, from what I gather, they have a bunch of options. They let the player do, for the most part, whatever they want. You can rebind controls. Why does Nintendo not have any of that, but it's still like the freaking gigantic company that it is, right?
Hmm.
Just some food for thought, right? Just, I
Yeah.
don't know. Just,
Yeah.
just something to think about, something to throw out there.
Yeah, for sure. I think, and I'll add Rune Factor here. This actually would encapsulate not just Guardians of Ozma, but also Rune Factory 4 and 5. They have pretty good quality of life and are not difficult games per se. Um, okay. I had one more quality of life example. So, a game, or a genre of games that pretty famously has great quality of life, and no one has and that quality of life is just like baked in to the series like for forever. I've been thinking of basically the Source games, like okay, maybe genre wouldn't be the right word, but games like Portal, games like okay, all the games that have like a quick save and like quick load and you can do it on the spot. I don't know how to call these kinds of games, but I've seen
The
it.
Valve games, right?
Yeah, like the Valve games, but there's other games that have it too. I'm trying to think of how to describe it. Um, yeah. Okay. Anyway, but Portal is the one that came to mind first. So Portal allows you to save and load basically anywhere, right? And it's a quick save option. So you can open the menu, quick save, and then you can just load whenever you want back to that spot. Literally lets you retry something like a jump or like a navigation option for the puzzle whenever you want from wherever you want. It's like almost a sandbox in that regard. I guess these are kind of related to sandbox games in a way. And guess what? I don't think I've ever seen anyone complain about these quality of life features being in the game. It's not like these quality of life features are like the most innovative thing in the planet or anything, right? Like, and to be honest, if you look outside of like this exact quick save, quick load feature in like Portal 1, that game doesn't really have that great of quality of life. I mean, it's fine, it's serviceable, it's not anything special, but definitely above average for a lot of other compared to like a lot of these other games that come out from much more heralded developers like FromSoft for some reason, right? And interestingly, I think people would still consider Portal 1 and or Portal 2, like they wouldn't consider them hard games, but they wouldn't consider them easy games either. So it's just an interesting thing to look at. Man, I wish I remember the other examples I was thinking of that had the quick save and quick load thing. Um, but it's funny too because the speedrunners really abuse it, and they abuse it for glitches, of course. But even beyond that, like it's like, okay, I'm about to go for this like really difficult trick, and then they quick save right there, right? And if they mess it up, they can just retry it, and that's like almost like having a save state, but it's like built into the game. So because it's built in the game, it's obviously perfectly fine for speedruns. In order to disallow it, you'd have to just say, all right, no quick save category, which I'm sure not a lot of people would be willing to endure, right? But regardless, thought I'd bring that up because it's a pretty strong example of quality of life being favorable. Anything else before we move on? Some other things I have in mind. Oh yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Oh yeah, some other things I have in mind were talking about difficulty scaling. Did you have something to say before we move on to that?
No, when you were talking about Valve game, I was like Valve games have quality of life the moment when you start downloading, if you already have those files, you know, because yeah, you have quicker download. You download less stuff if you already have a Source Engine game on your computer.
That's true. Yeah,
Yeah,
that is true.
jeez.
Yo, oh man, if you want to talk about like storage space on your computer quality of life, oh my goodness. When Blazblue Central Fiction first released on PC, the I think it was the sound files were uncompressed. So the game took up the game took up 50 gigabytes for no reason. And
yeah.
oh my goodness. That
Which is something Street Fighter has. Street Fighter 6 has right now. Like,
oh true, yeah.
You don't have to install story mode. Oh my goodness.
Oh, that's like, yeah, that's amazing quality of life.
Yeah.
So if you know you're a hardcore player and you probably won't be playing the story mode very much, then you can just install only what you care about. And in fact, I forgot to mention this too, but just being able to play the game on like lower fidelity or lower graphics and it's still being like comprehensible is a beautiful thing. Like potato friendly games. I know Retrorage is a big fan of playing
oh my goodness.
fighting games.
Oh, where's that GIF? Where's that? Oh, I have it. Let me post it.
Yeah. I can yeah, dude. It's so funny because I generally cannot comprehend what's going on the screen when I see him play at that resolution. But you know, if he can, then you know, hey, heads up, quality of life to SNK, who definitely did not intend it. So yes, the pictured right here is indeed the resolution that he plays Sam Show 2019.
Yeah, dude, there's not much to see in that game. I don't need the, you know what I'm saying? That's how good the game is. If the game is playable like that, that's how you know it's the best fighting game.
He's trying to role play as one of those like blind, you know, how do you call it? Those blind swordsmen.
It's awesome. Okay, so we can move on to difficulty scaling. So what did I mean by difficulty scaling with this? For those of you that don't know, and this is different from difficulty that's adaptive. Difficulty scaling is the idea of having, I mean, we talked about it a little bit with Lost Crown with sliders, but it's basically where if there's a certain component of difficulty in the game will increase that component of difficulty on like subsequent playthroughs after the player's familiar with stuff in the game already. So the very common example you'll see is pumping up the numbers of the HP or the damage that is taken from enemies. Or increasing the amount of defenses enemies have, or, you know, I mean, even this even applies to difficulty scaling as well, but just simply adding more patterns to the enemy. And a great example of this is in Bloodstained Ritual of the Night, which is Igarashi's latest Metroidvania. This game, if you play it on the higher unlocked difficulties after you beat the game, there's, I think, hard mode and nightmare mode. Both of those modes apply a method of difficulty scaling, and I'll list them out here. There's different, here are like some of the different ones they apply. So increasing the enemy HP, increasing damage taken from enemies, increasing the number of enemies in rooms, changing the types of enemies you can see in rooms, and adding new boss patterns. and we can encapsulate all these under difficulty scaling. And there obviously, this is not an exhaustive list of all the methods of difficulty scaling you can apply. There's plenty of other ways you can apply difficulty scaling. But our point in bringing this up is, how does difficulty scaling overall contribute to a game's perceived difficulty, right? Because at the end of the day, our perception of difficulty is what leads us to how we discuss these things, right? Well, for one, difficulty scaling can change the way the systems are applied in the game. If in Bloodstained Ritual of the Night you were reliant, let's say, on melee weapons in the normal mode playthrough, melee weapons might not be as effective if you're not very proficient with them in a hard mode or nightmare mode. So maybe in hard mode or nightmare mode, you start to rely more on the shards for damage output rather than melee weapons, because shards, if you have a sufficient enough mana pool, will be very effective sources of damage. But you need to be able to build your way towards having that mana pool. So that can change the way you engage with the game by having these elements in there. Another way of difficulty scaling can change the way you apply stuff in the game. In Valkyrie Profile 2 Silmeria, which I just recently finished, they actually implemented a just straight difficulty scaling in the form of their new game pluses. And apparently the new game pluses go up to 50. Basically, for every new game plus, the enemies are scaled in some way. I think the factors they scale them in are the HP of the enemies, the damage those enemies deal, the resistance those enemies have, and the rate at which the enemies can crit, or the rate at which they avoid your attacks. So these factors over the course of successive new game pluses might change what sort of strategies are viable, right? So maybe if you got away with, singular heavy hitting attacks with heavy warriors before, that might not be as feasible in higher new game pluses, maybe because the avoidance of enemies on higher new game pluses is too high. So if you do one hit and it doesn't hit, then you just lose all your damage, right? Whereas maybe multi-hits might be more effective. I'm just proposing a hypothetical here, of course. Or similarly, if you were reliant on magic in new game, magic might not be as effective in new game plus, maybe because the enemies have too much resistance for it to be effective. Things like that. Another example, which we would all be understanding of, is in Slay the Spire. Slay the Spire has the famous implementation of difficulty scaling, which is ascensions. And on different ascensions, the enemies will hit harder and have more damage, right? I believe these are the only thing that change, though, right? Or is it the types of enemies that can change as well?
No, there's a lot of changes actually.
Okay.
That half of them are really cool. Like
Yeah.
more elites start spawning, right? Which is a
Mm-hmm.
very nuanced change, by the way. There's a lot of implications from
Mm-hmm.
having more elites. That's not just number go up. Like it sounds like a number go up, but
Mm-hmm.
the way you interface with elites like fundamentally changes how you play the game. So that's very good, in fact, for uh Slay the Spire. Like
Mm-hmm.
increasing elites is the first ascension level, and that one I get like a, should I make this graph just on Slay the Spire ascensions, Lamar?
Yeah, feel free, of course.
Yeah, increasing elite, fantastic change, right? It's actually it makes the game more interesting. There's more potential, right? The game has more potential now with like how many relics you can get in a run because it increases that cap, right? But it also means that it's like the decision making changes because like, okay, do you play more risky or more safe, right? Versus something that's like, oh, enemies have more HP, right? Which doesn't really fundamentally change the game. It just makes the game more dog water, dude. It just makes the games more frustrating, right? It decreases the amount of things you can do, right? Because
Yeah.
the amount of my problem with a little bit of tangent, but I'll say it here real quick. My biggest issue with Slay the Spire Ascension is that as you go higher in the Ascension levels, the number of viable things you can do significantly decreases, right? Like like I feel like it's a very big problem when you're funneled into decision making, right? When the difficulty gets so high that you're funneled to one path, that becomes very problematic, right? So instead of like adapting to what's given to you, you're adapting every situation to try to get on that one path that you're supposed to go. So instead of having multiple adapting and making multiple branches, it's adapting to follow the one path that is absolutely necessary to get. If you kind of understand what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I do.
Like at Ascension 0, there's like 10,000 paths, right? And you can adapt. The adaptation is like, oh, which one do I want to choose, right? Versus at Ascension 20, it's like there's 3 paths, and the adaptation is how do I get to the 3 paths from wherever I start? I can start from like a horrible place, and I have to adapt to get onto those 3 paths somehow, or I can start near those paths and that adaptation isn't that much, right? I can
Hmm.
just get on the path and it's easy. And that's what I really don't like. Ascension 20, like I absolutely hate that fundamental like design theory
Yeah,
of, difficulty scaling where it's like decreasing the number of paths you can get to, but the difficulty is how can I get to those paths, right? I don't like that.
yeah, for sure. You know, in some ROM hacks I've seen of Soten, I've seen them try to rebalance the game, like, and that's the way they market the ROM hack for Soten. And the rebalancing is just increasing the HP of the bosses. And unfortunately, just increasing the HP of Soten bosses does not do much to fix the combat, because their attempt is their goal is to attempt to rebalance the game and fix the issues with the combat, since the combat is kind of serviceable but not entirely deep or intricate, right? But the problem with increasing the HP of the bosses is that it just makes it more tedious. There are absolutely strategies that will get you through the bosses no matter how much HP those bosses have. And guess what those strategies boil down to? AI manips, right? It's something that you even see in Mega Man, actually. Like, a lot of times you'll see people just go for AI manips. And this is the case even when they're forced to not use like the weapon that the boss is weak to, right? But at the end of the day, the most ideal thing to do is to AI manip the boss. I remember watching a Mega Man 01 speedrun, I believe it was, or Mega Man 02, one of those. And it was whichever game had the frog boss. And the idea for the frog boss was just to minute it out of doing the attack that wasted the least amount of time. And that being the strat would not have changed if the boss had more HP or did more damage to you. It would simply still be the same. It would be the same strat. Maybe if it had more HP, doing that strat would be more tedious, right? If the thing you're doing is really the same, but you have to do it for longer, and doing it for longer doesn't really change the execution aspect, then you know it's not really adding anything profound to scale the difficulty in that way. Things can be profound when you scale the difficulty in this way, though. I do think, excuse me, I do think some games that again, I played recently Valkyrie Profile, right? Some games will cause you to think more deeply about the strategies the game was already encouraging you to do when the enemies are scaled just by numbers. So, for example, if the enemies start, like, maybe not necessarily one-shotting you, but start locking you out of options that you would rely on when you would go for attrition-based strategies, then you're forced to go for one-shots, right? Because those attrition-based strategies will leave you in a very bad position and just slowly whittle down your resources. But when you go for one-shots in that game, it's not like it's taking you out of engaging with the game. You're trying to make use of all the mechanics that you know and learned about the way combat works in order to achieve a one-shot, you know? So those sorts of things can still be profound when the difficulty is scaled in a simpler way, or like kind of the lazy way. But it doesn't necessarily mean that it's always going to be the correct approach, or like the best approach for difficulty scaling. And an example of where I think the approach kind of falls short of accomplishing anything meaningful, again, obviously, it depends on the game, as we keep stressing. is a Abyss mode in Blazblue. Abyss mode in Blazblue is like a roguelite mode base. It's actually roguelike mode, right? Roguelike mode. For once, I can finally say roguelike. It's been a while since I've been able to say it, but this is basically a mode where you pick a character and you descend through floors, and the floors are just fighting one of the characters in the game. And as you descend a certain number of floors, or as you descend floors, you get more stat bonuses that you can apply to your character. And the stat bonuses are mainly just like HP up, damage up, speed up, meter gain up, um, automatic meter gain, things like this. Very simple things, right? But over the course of the game, you start to fight enemies that also have these stat buffs. And what these stat buffs are supposed to do is to make the context of fighting those respective enemies be way more difficult, right? Because the thing about fighting like a low stat Hakumen versus a high stat Hakumen is that Hakumen is inherently a character with very weak movement, but then when Hakumen has like strong movement, you're in very big trouble because that's one of his weaknesses gone. So it completely changes the arithmetic around how you approach the matchups. And think about it from the perspective of a character like Tager, right? Like Iron Tager is very famously slow and immobile and has a difficult time getting in and all of this, right? But what if Iron Tager had super armor on some of his attacks that otherwise don't have it? And what if he also had really good movement speed? That is a frightening prospect. And what tends to happen in Abyss mode is that you make it pretty far in descending the floors, and then you reach a choke point matchup that wouldn't ordinarily be a problem in the normal game. But the balancing of Abyss mode doesn't take into account the balance of the normal game. So you basically run into let's say like an 80-20 matchup where it's unreasonable for you to fight it. And how Retrorage mentioned with, there only being a certain number of viable builds for higher ascensions and Slay the Spire, this doesn't even apply in Abyss mode. In Abyss mode, you straight up have such unfavorable matchups that you can't even really do anything about. There's no stat buff that you can really like play for to make those matchups like not awful. You just have to kind of get lucky and hope that you don't get hit that often. You got to hope that that 20 component of the 80-20 matchup really goes in your favor. Otherwise, you're just in big trouble. So again, I say all this to say, like, Blazes of the Abyss mode is fun in its own right and definitely makes you look at Blazblue in a different way. But the difficulty that it presents kind of feels detached from the main game because it changes the calculus of how matchups would ordinarily work around the game's normal balance. And the game's normal balance is kind of thrown out the window to begin with because Abyss mode inherently tries to break those conventions with all the stat buffs you can apply to your characters that weren't originally taken into account with that character's original design. Fraufraw, did you have any difficulty scaling examples other than like the RE adaptive difficulty?
No, like I agree with what you guys mentioned earlier. Like, just if it's just stats up, that's not really good. It's just another way to extend your playtime in a very non-meaningful way. So
yeah, for
I mean,
sure.
we could talk about Binding of Isaac and how it works with that. So that's
true.
like kind of like new content,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, I can talk
It's
about
an
it a little bit.
interesting way to, yeah, it's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
A neutral interesting there, not derogatory, not positive,
Yeah.
neutral.
So yeah, those of you that are watching through video can see that we're constructing this matrix for Retrorage with related to difficulty scaling. Isaac, especially Repentance, has numerous ways in which the game, quote unquote, gets harder as you unlock more things, and that's obviously a roguelite game with a T, because you get upgrades that can carry over between runs. Upgrades being new potential items that you can pick up. Right now, whether those new item unlocks actually make the game easier or not is up for debate. Some people say it makes it easier because if you get that item, you insta win. But sometimes getting new items pollutes the pools in which you would be reliant on a game-winning item otherwise, right? So, for example, in the Mom's Knife, famously game-winning item in the Devil pool, whereas when you unlock, what's a negative example? If you unlock Sanguine Bond, that pollutes the Devil pool and doesn't necessarily help you that much. So it's worth thinking about those polar opposites. Now, the game has 2 or I think maybe 3 achievements that are related to the game getting harder through the game's own like admission. It's like everything gets harder too, and there's like the also the unlock for the alt path when you're playing Repentance. Everything gets harder is supposed to increase the. Okay, I don't remember every exact thing that everything gets harder and everything gets harder to changes about the game. Maybe I can pull it up. Okay, maybe while I'm pulling it up, Retrorage, you want to talk about your perspective on like Isaac's difficulty scaling?
Yeah, so Binding of Isaac, dude, yeah, adding bad items is just, I don't know, dude. I don't know, because yes, okay, they're not necessarily bad items. They're items. I've recently, as I've been being a Slay the Spire consultant, you know, I realized that I started talking about like the floor and ceiling of items or cards, right? So there's like a certain, like, some cards or items have a 0 floor. What does that mean? It means that they have potentially can do nothing for you, right? They like do
Hmm.
nothing on their own, and they only do something when certain conditions are met, right? Otherwise, they do nothing. So they have a 0 floor, right? They potentially give you no value because you're
Hmm.
never going to use it, right? Or it doesn't happen that you use it, right? And in these roguelites, there's a lot of items like that, surprisingly, right? Where
Yep.
like they just do nothing, but they can have a really high ceiling or a low ceiling. And what do I mean by ceiling? That means the potential positive or negative outcome that can come from them can be high, right? Despite potentially doing nothing for you, when it does do that something, it can be really good, right? And so that also works for like negative items or like bad card, like curses and Slay the Spire. I don't think there's like a curse equivalent or there is a curse equivalent in
Yeah.
Binding of Isaac, the curse rules, but like that's not in your control, I don't think. But Black Candle is totally in your control. You get Black Candle, then the potential, so Black Candle is is like an item that removes all curses, right? You're not
Yeah.
afflicted by any curses anymore,
Yep.
and that is an example of an item that has a pretty high floor, right? The value that you get is inherent, and like you will get value out of it. There's no world where it does nothing for you because curses are everywhere,
Yep.
right? Again, on every floor in Binding of Isaac. I think at the earlier games it's not always there, but like by the time you get true end mode or something, you're
Yep.
bound to run to at least 3 curses per run or something.
Yeah, it's a
I'm not sure.
33% chance to get a curse on a floor. Well, when you get like the last everything is terrible unlock.
Yeah. Oh, you know what? So there is a chance where it might do nothing for you, but that's pretty unlikely, right? So
Hmm.
yeah, max, but floor is 0 potentially, but very unlikely that the floor is 0. But anyways, so I feel like these items do like difficulty related in this way is it sucks because there are items that I love, right? That I want to see all the time. But it's also good because there's more pathways now, right? That like lead to victory, right? There's more potential ways to play the game, right? So it's like for me, it's like a love-hate relationship where I'm like, man, I like Magic Mush. If I could have Magic Mush every run, you know what I'm saying?
Hmm.
I'd be chilling. If I could have quad shot every run, oh my goodness, I'd be going ham, right? Because I love all the tier modifiers. Those are just really fun.
Yeah.
But like getting like Butterbean or something, the old one, the old Butterbean, where like you toot on getting hit. It's like so depressing. It's so depressing. Sometimes you can make an interesting run with like that. Don't get me wrong, but like I'm sure the new one's much better too. After they changed a lot of the bad items to be not as bad.
Yeah.
But,
Butterbean's really good now. Yeah.
yeah. So Butterbean, cracked now, right?
Mhm.
But like, I feel like that's the direction you should go for like roguelikes and adding new stuff, right? It's not the Yu-Gi-Oh theory, dude. I hate it when people are like, "Oh, you need bad items or you need bad cards to exist." I hate that. I hate when people start talking about that, right? Because they're like, "I need bad cards to show the good cards are good." I'm like, "No, you don't. No, you don't. The good cards will be good, and they'll come out naturally that they're good cards, right?
Yep.
If you make everything like decent or playable, like that's a good thing, right? Because then there's niches that these cards can fill eventually, right? But if you freaking release War Rocks who just do nothing and like consume your normal summon and just absolutely are trash, like there's no potential for that card. The card has no potential. War Rocks have less potential than like those normal vanilla fusion monsters because at least you could summon those with like ready fusion or something and get
Yeah.
like a body to go into XYZ or tuner off a one card starter, right? Or get that light fiend, my normal monster light fiend into fiendsmith somehow, dude. Like I don't know, dude. I hate it when people say like, "Oh yeah, we need bad cards to exist, or we need bad things to exist." To highlight, nah. Just make everything good, right? And if you want to make something bad, at least make it funny, right? I guess Binding of Isaac kind of does that, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So
I mean, Repentance has so many good items. It's unbelievable. Like so many items that are very useful. I'm sure you've seen in the runs I've done.
yeah,
Like there's so many good
yeah.
items. But yeah, building off of that, and I've got a page pulled up that describes the changes for Everything is Terrible. And it's called Everything is Terrible, my mistake, not Everything is Hard. Um, so after you beat Mom's Heart 5 times, bosses drop one less health pickup. The chance of receiving a curse increases. The bulb enemy can appear, and this is like an enemy that can like when it taps you, it drains like a couple charges from your active item. Um, Unlocks half soul hearts and unlocks micro batteries. So we can see that the difficulty in quotation marks is applied and scaled when you complete the game enough times. But there's also some benefits to be gained. Like the half soul hearts and the micro batteries are definitely pleasant things to get to be able to get in your runs. And a lot of people would see half soul hearts as something that clutters the soul heart pool, but half soul hearts are extremely useful still. um, when you are using sacrifice rooms and half soul heart is next to uh the the next heart that's adjacent to it is like a red heart or a bone heart. That half soul heart can be used to pay that sacrifice room as opposed to the normal full heart that you need for it. So it's like a niche thing that is very useful for when you get this unlock. And micro batteries are still useful in their own right as well. So people that see it as just polluting the types of things that you can get in your run, no, these difficulty scalings can be used as a benefit when you get better at the game. Obviously, a curse is not really inherently beneficial, but guess what? Even curses have their benefits. This is something that a lot of people don't even really realize, but Curse of the Maze is something beneficial. It lets you find secret rooms more easily. Curse of the Lost can be seen as a benefit, even though it's very annoying to not have the map, because you actually get more rooms on average for a floor that Curse of the Lost is applied on. What's another curse that it exists? Curse of the Unknown. Okay, I'll admit Curse of Unknown is not really that useful. You can still play through it, but it's not really useful. And then obviously Curse of the Blind is the inherently bad curse that you can't really do much about. Obviously, if you're a person that loves gambling, then maybe that's a joy for you to see Curse of the Blind. But regardless, it's worth pointing these out because these are absolutely examples of difficulty scaling, but they can be turned into maybe even potentially beneficial things, which is a kind of an interesting quirk about Isaac itself. But in general, the better you get at the game, if these difficulty scaling changes are not as significant, then perhaps the game is doing a good job of offering that trajectory towards getting better. I can't remember exactly what Everything is Terrible 2 changes. I do recall the chance of spawning champions increasing or something like that. But I don't remember all the changes exactly. I just couldn't find the article from the wiki here. In fact, maybe we'll be able to find it in this page. But yeah, regardless, it's worth pointing out examples of difficulty scaling because I think a lot of games handle it amateurishly, and a lot of games handle it wonderfully, but players tend to see it not so positively for some reason. At the end of the day, if you love the game, difficulty scaling can be seen as a way to offer more content, as Retrorage has marked on this matrix here. They can offer a means of more replayability, right? Obviously, you would hope for the difficulty scaling to provide an interesting means of letting that replayability be possible. And again, a lot of developers tend to not put too much thought into difficulty scaling. They just say, all right, we'll pump up these numbers, or we'll add these skulls. Like, you know, Hades has the skulls basically, or Sanctum 2 has the skulls, where it makes your run basically tougher by you know, you having all these like negative benefits applied. Actually, even Halo, right? Halo has the skulls as well, with the explosions being bigger and stuff like that. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
Amazing.
It's really cool. It does absolutely change the way the game is played. And I think the changes that are made to the gameplay are pretty interesting, I would say. So yeah, it's all great ways to apply difficulty scaling. Obviously, it requires thought to be put into your specific game, and in evaluating the game systems in their context to know whether some kinds of difficulty scaling are meaningful or not for that particular game. Which is why, obviously, we can't make a blanket statement that pumping up the numbers is bad per se, because it works in certain games, like I mentioned with Valkyrie Profile 2, Silmeria. On a surface level, it's probably not as interesting, but you know, again, evaluating it is per game. And for games like Igarashi's Bloodstained Ritual of the Night, the things I mentioned and outlined in this list, let me move it down a little bit. The things I mentioned here are where, oops, where's the mouse? The things I mentioned here are things that work quite well for this particular game. Like changing the boss patterns is lovely because it allows you to see these bosses in a new light that you probably wouldn't have seen them in your first normal playthrough. And what's even cooler about this is that you can't normally play hard mode or nightmare mode before you've beaten the game once. But if you're already an experienced player and you just want to go straight to hard mode or nightmare mode, you can input, I think, a certain file name or something like this in order to immediately have nightmare mode or hard mode unlocked. It's really cool. I like that. Because, you know, normally I think if you're a new player and the dev trusts their vision for like the things they've changed in the higher difficulties, then they wouldn't want the new player to be scared off by those things right away. So they don't allow the new player to do it, right? And this is actually something they do in Metroid Dread, where you can only play the game on rookie mode or normal mode when you first play it, and you won't unlock the higher difficulty until after you've beaten it once, which to me seems very reasonable. Because even if you're an experienced Metroid gamer, the higher like the Metroid Dread is a very unique kind of Metroid game, and it plays kind of differently from even what the. Can you guys still hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, you cut up for a second, but I can hear you.
Oh, what in the world? That was weird. Okay, yeah. Hopefully everything was caught still. But yeah, Metroid Dread is still quite different from Samus Returns and all the previous 2D Metroids. So, you know, making the player have to beat the game once in order to unlock the higher difficulties is pretty reasonable to me.
I think that they should add a for that. I think all games should come with a Konami code.
Yeah.
Right? Like if I like repurchase the game or something, or get a new copy or for some reason or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't have to go play the game again to like access other content, right?
Yeah.
That's just my opinion. It doesn't have to be there, but I would like that.
Yeah.
Some hidden Konami code that you have to go out of your way to find, right? So, yeah. Just that, a little tangent. But
Yeah, doesn't Slay the Spire have that?
Is it?
There's like a console command that you could just unlock everything right away.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, neat.
Oh,
That's
Yeah.
great. Yeah.
that ties to quality of life. Actually, I think we've talked about this before. Retrorage, with having a game having a debug mode, which actually,
Oh, that's right.
for that matter, Isaac itself basically has a debug mode with the console. If
Yeah.
you enable the console in your launch settings, then you can access the console in game and literally I mean, you can literally do cheats while you're in the console, but you can play the game however you want. You can spawn yourself in different floors. You can give yourself different items. It allows you to experiment with stuff and learn about items that you might not frequently see and things like that. I know that some speedrunners and some challenge runners and also people that do streaks can use console to train themselves ahead of time before they start their streak, and you know they get in a setting where experimenting is maybe a bit more risky, right? Yeah, the debug mode is great, and I know that that's something that we can definitely add to our quality of life outline. Let me actually include Isaac on this. Okay. Mind you, Isaac's quality of life is still pretty bad until recently.
Yeah. No item description until what, repentance or something?
Yeah, exactly. The repentance beta specifically. So, we'll put it in. We'll put it.
We can
Okay.
just add a line to show its progress from where it began to where it is now.
Okay, so like lacking quality of life. So it's kind of going from left to right. here.
Yeah. So it could have like started here and then now it's right here. Where would you say it is at now? Like here?
Yeah, like right there. It stops right there. Yeah, it's still not like the most quality of life in the world, but it's better now.
Oh, and those secret room patterns.
Yeah.
I don't remember. I did not learn about that until I saw your gameplay.
Yeah, dude.
I wonder if the game ever taught you about that at any given point. No,
literally
right?
doesn't.
Knowledge
It literally
diffusion.
doesn't.
Knowledge.
It's actually a knowledge check.
It's a knowledge check. It's emergent gameplay. I think even the developers didn't necessarily program it like that. It's just people kind of
caught the pattern, how the rooms are generated, right?
Yeah. Like they worked out the logic from playing so much and from data mining to understand it. Like I don't even think the developers necessarily were thinking oh, this is how we'll play secret rooms. Like no, it just people kind of worked out from reverse.
Okay, all right. Yeah, I get it.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy actually. Thinking about that now, because it's when once you know about secret room placements, you're not really thinking about oh, this is how I know about it. It's just kind of you just kind of know. But at the same time, when you're first starting out, these things are so alien and really they're obscure for no reason too, because the game teaches you literally nothing. So
I guess the secret rooms are not they're not mandatory to unlock all the contents of the game, right?
I think when you first open a secret room, there's an achievement for it, but you actually do need secret rooms to unlock every single achievement, because there's some achievements tied to how do I say it? Some unlocks give you an item that's in the secret room pool, and then you need to pick up every single item in the game once to get all the achievements. So
okay, but I mean occasionally people can find secret rooms, right? So
that's true. Correct.
I guess knowing where they would spawn would expedite the process itself.
Absolutely.
But I don't think there are any achievements or unlockables that require you to find every secret room on a level or anything like that, right?
That's correct. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
That's right.
Then I guess that's fair. Yeah, it's not too it's not too punishing.
Yeah. I will say the devs designed some rooms to purposely let the player discover that secret rooms exist, because for secret rooms, it's funny. Secret rooms oftentimes have a room adjacent to them that has a lot of explosive enemies. It's just it's like a property. It's not a guarantee.
Or for me, how I discover secret room, they're just they had to basically spell out for me, with the way how the debris are being placed, etc. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think some items also let you know where secret rooms are. So
okay.
the blue map, What else? The mind from the Angel Room.
Yeah, or the sun, or what's that card?
Yeah, the sun, the world as well. Yeah. Yeah. So there's definitely means of figuring it. I mean, obviously the game is just tells you nothing. And even right now, even with the item descriptions being in game appropriately without mods, like it's still the quality of life is like bare bones still. But the fact that the console is there does make it so that you can at least practice stuff. Okay. Great stuff. I think we covered a lot of angles for difficulty scaling. Trying to think if there's anything else. Yeah, I mean the roguelike and roguelite angle is definitely pretty cool because I don't. Oh right, I mentioned Sanctum 2. Retrorage, do you have anything to mention about Sanctum 2?
Oh, the modifiers?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh no, the modifiers are. It's the same thing with the. But it's a combination of everything from Slay the Spire. The bad parts, at least, where
Right.
the time decreases because everyone moves faster. The enemies regenerate health, which is
Mm-hmm.
the worst one, to be honest. The one where they regenerate health is like so bad. It's
Yeah.
it's it's double. It's like you get less time to do anything, right? Because if you let them regenerate, you just die,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yep.
But not only does it lower the time that you have to do an action, which is part of like, if you look at my graph here, that's part of one of the difficulty scalings that I hate,
Yeah.
right? It also makes it so that you're forced, you are literally forced to do certain things or you will lose,
Mm.
right? So, dude, just thank them to the modifiers. That's like the opposite of Halo modifiers. Halo 2 has some horrible modifiers as well. Like,
Mm.
if you look at the Halo 2 skulls where you don't have a HUD, like not having a HUD is just why is that even there? Like, what was the purpose of that? It just makes the game look bad, you know? Like, I don't think it necessarily even makes the game more difficult or not. Like, oh, okay, I don't have a cursor. I can aim a little bit less, right? It just
Yeah.
the immersion, it just breaks immersion. There's no arms or anything. There's no guns. It makes the game less cool. So, right, I just hate bad, bad, bad.
No, for
Sanctum
sure.
2, not very good. Those difficulty spiders are. It makes the game. Yes, it's like a puzzle where it's like, what is that one path to beat the level, right? But it's not fun. It's the run back. Run back the game is Sanctum 2 on 5 modifiers, right? Because you're basically doing like what you said, the linear speedrunning method where you're like you try a strategy to the end, and then if you
Yeah.
mess it up, you gotta do 10 waves, mind you. Like each attempt takes like 30 minutes. 30 minutes of doing the exact same thing just to get another attempt at
Yeah.
doing the thing that you're trying to do. Like, okay, story time. Me and Ross, we beat the entire game on all freaking Sanctum 2 modifiers, right? I don't know why we did that. Ross is he's the Dark Souls player. He's got to do everything on the hardest difficulty for some reason, dude. Right? But it was fun. Playing the game with the homies is fun. But anyways, there's this one strategy where you have to farm mines, right? You have to farm mines for 10 rounds. So you have like 40 mines at the very end, right? Because the boss regenerates health and has like 500 million HP or something, right? And
Mhm.
like this boss destroys your towers. So all the towers that you built up to that wave, he like slaps all of them, right? So you have to build your towers in a way where that he like follows this path which doesn't destroy your towers immediately, and then he follows the path into your 40 mines, right?
Mm.
And his movement is whack, right? This game is not like it's not a it's pretty old, right? So the
Yeah.
AI kind of like jitters in their movement, and if he like jitters onto the mines, but like just barely, and like jitters away, like all 40 mines blow up, and you do 0 damage, right? Guess what?
Run
We
back.
had to do it like 4 times. We had to do it like 4 times to get him to like ideally get on the mines. Can you imagine that? And getting to that wave 10 was not hard. It's like we failed at like wave 7 because there's like multiple, in those speedrun choke points. There's multiple choke points before you get to wave 10.
Yeah.
So like, oh, dude, oh.
Bruh.
I guess
Yeah.
there's like a enjoyment to finding what the solution, what that like couple solution paths are. Like, there's some fun in that, I guess, right? But yeah, I don't know. Big hater, big hater. Sanctum 2 is a good game. Just don't play it on 5 modifiers. You know?
Yeah, for sure. Okay, well, cool. Trying to think if I had anything else. Yeah, I mean, I had mentioned some examples other than Isaac. We talked about Slay the Spire Ascension. We talked about Valkyrie Profiles, New Game Pluses. You know, there's also the New Game Pluses and or not New Game Pluses. The the like additional character modes that you can play as in some of the Castlevania games. And the way those are scaled is that they handle the enemy stats differently, since the character you're playing as in those in those modes tend to be a bit squishier than, you know, your Soma Cruz or your Alucard. So you have to be a lot more careful navigating through the rooms, even though the enemies are about the same in terms of their behavior and their placement. So, you know, different ways to
We can
handle
talk
it.
about MMO, like MMR, right?
Oh,
Difficulty
yeah.
scaling in multiplayer games.
Yeah, sure.
If you wanna mention it.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, we can transition over to that. So single player games have a very distinct method of applying difficulty. How about multiplayer games, right? Multiplayer games obviously are inherently different since you're playing against real players as opposed to playing against the obstacles the developers put in the game. Inherently, obstacles that developers put in the game, especially with modern games nowadays, are meant to be beaten. And obviously, that's up for debate for older games, because a lot of older games, their intent was to make the game as long to beat as possible so that, you know, the player can feel like they got good value out of the money they spent. And also it makes sure that the player wouldn't be able to beat the game before the rental period ends, right? But games nowadays, the obstacles developers put in the game, they're meant to be beaten. Multiplayer games, those solutions that you use to beat other players might not even be solutions that work like the next day or even the next patch for that matter, because the game is being balanced around other players that can adapt, and they can adapt using problem solving skills that obviously naive AI in single player games wouldn't be able to have. And we've talked about the example of difficulty scaling and how it's applied in single player games. In multiplayer games, the way this difficulty is handled to make sure that your ability to fight other players is balanced is by having MMR, matchmaking rating. And if the matchmaking is good, you'll usually play against players that are around your skill level. Now, what if you didn't want to play against players, or what if you couldn't play against players at your skill level? When you play against players that are way better than you, you feel helpless. You feel how much of a difference there is in the skill gap. And we actually had a small conversation about how MMR how we had a small conversation yesterday before our deadlock session where we were talking about MMR for speedrun races for the Soten randomizer, because right now the Soten randomizer developers are trying to look for a new system that sufficiently supports how the racing infrastructure is handled in the long library Discord server, compared to, you know, your average speedrun racing community where there might be more 1v1 races, or there might be, you know, there might not even be a randomizer, right? They might just be racing on the vanilla speedrun. So with that in mind, they're trying to make a system that's better than a straight ELO system, where, you know, typically in your typical ELO matchmaking rating, basically any player that you beat is a win, right? And in the case of multiple person races, if you finish first place, then you might be considered to have beaten all the other people in that race, right? Because you finished above all those other people. Now, the problem with that is if you consider yourself having gotten a win against all those other people, you played only one race, but it'll count as the number of players minus yourself as that number of wins. So if there's 5 players, you'll have gotten 4 wins by finishing in first place. If you're finishing in third place with 5 players, then you'll have gotten 2 wins and 2 losses. So that makes the idea of scaling difficulty for multiplayer situations a lot weirder of a scenario to handle, because you have to make sure that the matchmaking rating that is being used to divide the player base and balance out the games that take place is adequate enough to represent how that game is played. And you have to also make sure that there's a fair means of representing the increase in skill that a player receives, and also the changes that can happen to the game itself. If those changes to the game are substantial enough and affect the way the MMR might be represented, then you might have to do an MMR reset, and that would cause the MMR to represent a different level of skill than maybe what was represented before the patch took place. Obviously I'm using the difficulty scaling framing for this so we can tie it more closely to what we're talking about today, but obviously matchmaking rating systems and just multiplayer games in general would absolutely deserve an episode of their own at some point, which we would hope to be able to do in the near future. But for now, how do you guys feel about just in general how multiplayer games are situated in their difficulty, right? Like, if let's say there's a character who has a perceived broken kit, would that be looked at in the same way? Because a lot of times players either look for their own solutions to resolve them, or they just hope for a patch to fix it, right? So how do we feel about the conversation around difficulty in multiplayer games compared to single player games?
I feel like, so I've been playing Street Fighter 6 with someone who's new to fighting games, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like I'm I'm kind of sandbagging to like teach them like the fundamentals, right? So like I'd play into a match where I'd basically only use like crouching medium kick Hadouken, right? And that's it. I would do like a couple jump ins, and I would do my only combo would be crouching medium kick into Hadouken, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because learning the neutral of like lows and space, being able to like see a jump in and like what you should do is like what I'm trying to like teach them about, right? Because if I just slapped them and then did a drive rush combo into like 30% and then had them wake up into Oki, where I do like grab, throw, strike, or overhead low, right? They just wouldn't be able to play the game, because fighting games make you not play the game. In order to win in a fighting game, you make your opponent not play the game. And that's not what I'm trying to do, right? When
Yep.
you're learning the game, you want to play as much of the game as possible. However, the game like might be played, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like if I'm just here, I counter hit him. Let me hit them with this 12-second combo into Oki setup, because that'll teach them how to play, right? That'll teach my new player how to play the game. And then if you don't have an MMR system, or like this is the multiplayer game you're running into, it's gonna be very difficult. Very, very difficult for someone to like get into the game. I'm not even talking about playing the game. I'm just talking about getting into the game,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
In single player games, this is why you know what? Relating this to crash fighting games, this is why single player is so important, because it lets the player interface with a static environment, right? Versus jumping into freaking multiplayer and getting washed by your opponent. You know what I'm saying? Like that's like a perfect segue to like the importance of single player in these multiplayer games, or like some version of single player content where you can like just learn, just play the game. But yeah.
Yep. No, you're absolutely right. Fraufraw, you're a Street Fighter, um how to say it, you're a Street Fighter enthusiast yourself. um I know there was a time where you were new to the game, and it might have been a bit more difficult to get into the game and get into the rhythm of things, learn your characters and stuff. But now that you're more experienced, how how does it feel to learn new stuff, right? Like to get past the hurdles that you have to overcome in SF6.
Well, for me right now, I at my stage right now in Street Fighter, for me to improve, it's about learning the matchups, right? Learning the frame data. It's like learning the more like excruciating details about the game that your average players aren't going to even care about. But like for multiplayer competitive games, I think ideally, for balancing. Wait, we're talking about balancing, right?
Yeah, of course. That can apply as well.
Yeah, like ideally, developers want the games to be self-balancing, right? This is kind of the approach that Capcom is taking for Street Fighter 6. So they only update balance the game like once like every quarter or so. Sometimes probably even longer. This is the kind of approach they want to take. They want to be as hands off as possible. In a in a best case scenario, the game just balances itself. Like people find an overpowered character, but eventually it gets overplayed, and people know how to deal with set characters, right? But there will come a time when characters are just when developers need to be directly involved with balancing, right? So I think in one of the iterations for Akali and League of Legends, like there's such a huge disparity between the win rate of Akali in high elo versus like low elo,
Mm.
and yeah, that's when developers just need to step in to balance the characters. Yeah,
Yeah.
or otherwise, it's just yeah.
I think the disparity thing is very interesting. We've actually had this exact discussion before in another podcast that we used to be a part of, FGC UCLA's Earthsign Combo Lab audio. Quick plug for that. If any of you are interested in catching past episodes of that podcast series, I'll link that in the description as well. We talked about in that episode, like balance in fighting games, or not, I said episode. We talked about in that podcast series, balance in fighting games. We talked about how fighting games have needed to have uh different a different approach to addressing concerns of like players thinking a character's broken or not, and how these games are just balanced in general. The approach just basically has to be different because
Yeah, sorry. I just wanted to make sure that I'm still like on topic because I kind of zoned out
yeah.
a little like a few minutes ago. So
Oh no, you're good. You're good. Yeah, I mentioned around the time we started shifting over to multiplayer games that it would definitely deserve its own episode to cover this thing more in depth. But the main thing we're trying to tie it into is like how the perceived difficulty for multiplayer games differs greatly, right? And what factors contribute to that. If there's like a problem that players are running into with a certain character and it requires solutions, those solutions are not going to be like, oh, I just need to get better, because obviously the devs made it so that I can beat this game, right? They wouldn't surely they wouldn't make it so that the game's not beatable. That's like the single player mindset. Whereas the multiplayer mindset is like, well, I'm not sure what the solution is. I'll try to see what other players did to get through it, right? So if the other players can't get through it either, the higher level players that have a higher MMR, then maybe the solution is ask for ask for a patch, or the solution is get more time against that character and find a counter pick or find someone that has a better matchup into that character. Like the solutions are maybe they look different.
I mean, I tend to not have problem with multiplayer game difficulties, be it competitive, be it MMO, because usually those games are more live servicey in their nature. So it's
Yeah.
like pretty much the developer's responsibility to make sure the difficulties are well are well fleshed out pretty much. Yeah.
You know what's interesting too? I think multiplayer games don't just have to have difficulties that are associated with metagaming against, real players, as what we've been discussing so far, but also just related to the entry barrier, right? Retrorage mentioned the entry barrier for SF6 because, he had to sandbag in order to make sure that he wasn't eliminating the ability to play for his friend, right? RTSs notoriously have a very difficult entry barrier. Like, you have to be able to multitask, you have to be able to macro super hard, and you have to be able to micro. The micro is intense in those games, and they're all real time decision making. It's not like you can just take your time to turn by turn plan out your actions. No, you got to be able to do it in real time, and you get swallowed out by players that know what they're doing. It's honestly pretty. It's pretty insane how RTSs have such a high floor, and I wouldn't say it's no wonder they're niche. If anything, it's kind of incredible. I'll say like the opposite thing. It's kind of incredible that they're still played and adored and treasured by such a broad community to this day. I mean, obviously they're not the most popular thing out there, but plenty of people still love watching RTSs, especially at the highest level. And I think it does in part go to show, obviously partially tangential, but it does go to show that people do love watching people do things that are perceived as difficult, like people love watching the Olympics, people love watching sports, people love doing feats that they personally couldn't do, and RTS is kind of play into that a little bit. One thing I'll mention too, a lot of games nowadays have moved away from the RTS genre. I'm not gonna try to pretend I know the reasons for that or even propose the reasons for it, but the point I want to make is that the old school RTSs still offered some form of quality of life that allowed the player to practice things, like maybe against an AI or maybe in like a custom map mode, like with Warcraft 3 or with older StarCraft as well. I think Age of Empires has maybe such a mode. I've never played Age of Empires personally, but I've watched some gameplay of it. Maybe it has such a mode. But games like that are such a high barrier of entry, and the floor is really high, and the ceiling is also really high. So I think that would equate to a difficult game, needless to say. MOBAs on the sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, yeah, go for it.
Oh, okay, yeah. So I personally, for me, I think the accessibility for RTS game is it's designed in a more in a single player setting, right? The developers never. I highly doubt the developers like envision RTS to evolve into the kind of monster it is nowadays, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because for people who really want to invest into competitive RTS, like it's more about self-learning than it's than following through the tutorials. You know what? RTS is basically just fighting games, but top down. If you really think about it,
True. Yeah.
right?
Yep. They use they use a mode for games that were probably originally meant to be single player, and turn it into a competitive player versus player mode. That is true. That is a good point.
Mm-hmm.
I think MOBAs evolving out of RTSs originally as well has contributed to MOBAs being basically a solely multiplayer PvP experience, because MOBAs nowadays generally have little to no single player. It would be very weird to even see single player, generally speaking. Dota 2 has some like arcade has like an arcade map set of maps that the community makes, like, so you can play those and have fun with them, but it's not really the same as like a proper single player mode.
They're basically ARPGs like Torchlight.
If you really think about it, MOBA is basically like the competitive Smash out of your conventional party Smash game, right?
That's true. Partially, yeah. Smash is a funny one because that the developers clearly did not mean for people to just remove all the settings and play.
Yeah, like remove all the item drops, no walk off on the stage, etc. Yeah, so yeah.
Yeah, I mean they provided the means to be able to do so, but I don't think they really expected people to do that and play it for money in tournaments. Yeah, and also some other MOBAs that were more niche around the the MOBA heyday. They have single player, but the single player is so separate and detached from like the multiplayer that it ends up just feeling like a separate game, which I think kind of reveals somewhat of a profound aspect about games that are meant for PvP, that when you have a game that's meant for PvP and then there's a single player, that single player being a different game has an opportunity to let that single player be the pipeline towards playing the competitive game if they offer those means within the single player's design. Obviously, tough to do. You have to craft it pretty deliberately. And a lot of the time, the single player ends up just being bare bones. So
Yeah,
they
like
don't
most
really-
of the time, the tutorials in RTS, they just tell you, like, they don't even teach you the shortcuts.
right, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh man,
And I'm sure the
fascinating.
last thing people want to learn will be the short. That's like the frame rates of fighting games, if you think about it.
Yeah, no, exactly. Oh my goodness. Yeah, it's you have to be really, like we talked about player interest, right? You have to be super interested in RTSs to overcome that initial barrier of entry.
Or have a very strong IP to back it up. Like I try to
Yeah.
use Smash as an example, but I guess getting into Smash competitive isn't as hard because Smash has such like strong IPs behind it.
Yeah.
That does wonders. But that 95 to 99% of the game companies don't have that, right?
Yeah, exactly. The other thing too is when people are playing, like, let's say like MMOs, a lot of the time MMOs have an opportunity to like lead people towards PvP just by them playing the game, right? Because maybe playing the game, like, you know, the PvE content or just playing the storyline, whatever they have in the game, lets you become strong enough or lets you become proficient enough to eventually be interested in like PvP. It's like, hey, I want to kind of try my skills or try my gear at a real player. Or maybe they incorporate the PvP naturally into the core MMO gameplay with player kills being allowed in the
Yeah,
world.
open world PvPs. Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess I enjoy MMO PvPs if it's in an equalized setting. Sure, why not?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean,
But I tend to stay away from it. I'm a PvE god, yo.
yeah, no, definitely. I mean, I personally, yeah, with Black Desert Online PvP, I only did like after a certain point of playing PvP with the guilds and Node Wars, like I was like, man, I'm not really having that much fun with this. So, you know, I was okay with just flagging on, flagging off in open world and PKing people whenever they came near my grind spot, right? Like that sort of thing is just its own little fun. But at the same time, it's up to the game whether they want to apply those things to like a branching pipeline towards PvP. Because I feel like that is only worth it as strong as your PvP in your game is in the first place. Like obviously WoW PvP Arena is still popular enough to this day, but that's because WoW is popular itself. Like that doesn't really have much to do with the PvP being good per se, as much as WoW is just a popular game. Whereas for fighting games are not popular. So if they had like a base game that, you know, was sound enough, that would not necessarily mean that people would be interested in playing against real players from that. And unfortunately, some older games that sold very well did not contribute to the fighting game community becoming very big. And I say fighting game community here as in like a lot of people registering for tournaments. I mean, we can see this with SF6. Like SF6 popularity in Japan is not tied to, oh, look at all these people that tried out the single player for the first time and now they're interested in playing against real players. No, they're interested in SF6 because they want to fight the real players for the most part. And the single player content is just to justify the price tag a bit more, right? Separate topic, perhaps. Maybe we should cover that as well.
Yeah, it should be the next podcast. Did
Yeah.
online ruin fighting games or something?
Yeah. All right. I don't think I had much else to say on this one. But it is interesting to talk about because multiplayer games are inherently difficult from a different angle since you're playing against real people, and the real people strategies are tied to metagaming rather than tied to figuring out what the developers' strategies are for getting through the game. Because a lot of the times those two things don't overlap for a multiplayer game. You might not even be using developer intended strats for playing against real players. You might be making use of and even in Marvel 3, like a lot of the time we're making use of glitches, right? Like TAC infinites are a glitch, obviously. The DHC glitch, which is pretty famous. Making use of like all these combos that are clearly like extensions of what is shown in like the combo trial mode in Marvel 3. It goes beyond what the developers quote unquote would have envisioned or intended, but at the end of the day, that's the context within which multiplayer games exist. Like, you're trying to beat another player, so you have to gradually find these things over time, and it's just naturally going to end up going beyond whatever the developers themselves would have envisioned, if the game is crafted well. Or if it's like a Guilty Gear Strive, then you're very limited, so you're not going to find much beyond what the developers exactly want you to do. Okay. So that is the extent of the topics I personally had in mind for this episode, but if any of you had additional things before we do like a synthesis, then now is the time to bring them up.
Yeah, I just one little meme point that I brought up. It's like in a single player games, you can increase the difficulty by self-imposed challenges, right? Like speedrunning, for example.
Mm-hmm.
But like when you do that in a multiplayer game, you're griefing. So just
Yeah, true.
you're being a griefer.
the
Same
bouts.
thing but different outcomes.
Yeah, exactly. That League of Legends streamer that like streams himself griefing in top lane on solo queue. It's so funny. Like, that's entertainment, but obviously, yeah, if you're taking it seriously, then it's pretty bad.
Yeah, increasing your own difficulty in multiplayer games, you're griefing.
Yep.
That's griefing.
Yep, exactly.
That's why sandbagging, like sometimes, I always remember that one guy who sandbagged me in King of 13. Dude, I got so tilted.
Your body.
I got so tilted, dude. You could do that in your single player arcade mode, dude. Don't do that again for you, man.
Yeah. Yeah.
Never forget you.
This is a good Venn diagram. I like it a lot. Was there anything you wanted to touch on in more detail from this?
Play more single player games, man.
Yeah.
That's what.
Well,
not unrelated.
Yeah, fighting games are. Okay. Well, fraufraw, did you have anything else as well?
No, not particularly.
Okay. Well, excellent. So, I guess we can go to synthesis then. So overall, I think we've tried to touch on as many things as possible. This is kind of like the sample platter of the topic of difficulty as far as video games are concerned. Obviously, a ton to take in overall, but I think at the end of the day, it's important to understand that difficulty has so many dimensions to it that it's not something that you can just give a surface level attention to when you're developing a game. Like, please, developers, take into account numerous angles of difficulty a bit more if you really want to make your game like as wonderful as possible. Or obviously, if you don't want to put in that level of granularity of effort, then that's okay too. Your game may still succeed, depending on the type of audience you're trying to target and other factors, but you could always make your game better by considering as many of these angles as possible. We talked about punishment and difficulty today, trying to just understand a bit more deeply how that relates to some of the games that we've been experiencing recently. We had some new conclusions with games like Sekiro. We revisited some previously discussed topics from MOBAs, with Deadlock now included in the mix. We talked about Zexion and Mio, as well as Requiem. And we also included in this discussion of difficulty quality of life, because quality of life does affect people's perception of difficulty nowadays, even though they're not really supposed to be tied together in this way. It does affect people's perception of difficulty because, again, people use the word difficulty in a broad sense nowadays. But of course, I think if there's anything to gather from what we've discussed, it's not a bad thing to be a bit more precise about the word choice when we're talking about certain things. Like when we say, "Oh, this game is so difficult," like what about it was it that made you think it was difficult? And then the person mentions, "Oh, the runbacks are so long." Saying the runbacks are so long is actually more useful of a thing to be direct about than just saying the game is difficult, because clearly difficulty, just saying difficulty in itself is just not enough to capture some of these deeper things that may be tied to it, but not even necessarily directly associated with the same concept. But yeah, quality of life exists in numerous forms. We talked about save states. We talked about fast travel being present. We talked about sliders. We mentioned information being available through, like, item descriptions in Isaac, having a debug console in Isaac as well. Nintendo games lacking quality of life because they force you to use their exact control scheme and don't really have a wealth of options available in the options menu, whether that's difficulty options or whether that's the ability to change like your camera sensitivity or things like that. They don't see that as necessary because they fully believe in their design vision, which can work for their games, right? But doesn't work for every game. And it doesn't hurt your game at all to be more conscious of quality of life options, because quality of life is only meant to add more quality to your game. And then
I think recently, real quick, Nintendo's been getting off that FPE train. Right? I think Sakurai is always trying to give player options, but Kirby Air Riders has a wealth of accessibility.
Yeah.
Quality of life options. So maybe Nintendo's going towards a better direction, but we'll see.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's important to point out, guys, and really want to emphasize this, that these games that don't have a lot of quality of life and are still very successful, like Nintendo games, are play tested to such an nth degree to make sure that they work properly. Well, I say this, and then Pokemon games are released and they're just trash, but it's a separate thing.
The Pokemon aren't Nintendo games.
Separate thing. Okay. So most of the games are talking about, like the Donkey Kong Bonanza, or is it called Bonanza? Yeah, Bonanza. Donkey Kong Bonanza, Metroid Dread, Kirby Air Riders. These games work on release. They work because they're tested. Okay. When you release games that are just, I'm not mincing my words here, complete garbage, don't even work, you can't go and say, "Oh, the quality of life is there to add difficulty," and then the game just doesn't work. Like, come on now. Okay. And then we talked about difficulty scaling. And actually, before we talk about difficulty scale, or talk about it for the synthesis, I want to mention again, there is this idea of difficulty due to jank or difficulty due to lack of quality of life features. And again, when we talk about old school games in this manner, old school games are old school games. These games were not as refined as, like, developers were not as experienced in the art of game design or game development as they are nowadays. Like, games nowadays are way, way, way more polished, and people have a lot more experience in making them. I mean, we can clearly see it with the technical advancements that have been made in the industry, right? Beyond the visual flair or spectacle, right? Like, the ability to, explore the mechanics of a game is just so much deeper than what a lot of older games would have, per se. And if the game is difficult due to lack of quality of life, that is probably not a whole lot of solid ground for your game to stand on. Like, the baseline of your game better be solid ground. Like, it better have some good fundamentals. Otherwise, that difficulty due to lack of quality of life is going to cause the rest of the game to just fall apart. All right, difficulty scaling. Where we talked about the ways in which a game can apply increased difficulty through, like, modifiers or skulls, or just increasing the range of patterns that you might have to deal with. We talked about numerous examples in games such as Sanctum 2, Halo, Slay the Spire, Isaac, Bloodstained, Ritual of the Night, etc., RPGs as well. And we came to the conclusion that, depending on the game, these various degrees of difficulty scaling can be more or less meaningful, right? So again, it's worth taking into account the context of your individual game for these things. And finally, we talked about difficulty as it relates to multiplayer games, and we tried not to touch on this too much because it is kind of a podcast topic of its own. And again, we wish to explore it further in a future episode. So those of you that are not subscribed, please make sure to subscribe so that you don't miss when we talk about that in the future episode. We talked about the ability to adapt to a real person being its own kind of element of difficulty that is separate from what single player games would have. We talked about how matchmaking rating is necessary to ensure that there's a bit of a shield for like what would otherwise be like an unnecessary difficulty element. Because, you know, if you don't have matchmaking rating, then the players that are just complete newbies have to fight against players that are so experienced. And it's unreasonable to expect that newbie players to have any opportunity to know what they're doing or even have a chance of gaining something out of fighting that, you know, very experienced player. Of course, unless you're playing a modern baby fighting game where it doesn't matter to begin with. The entry barrier for games like RTSs is super high, and we talked about why that might be the case. We talked about people griefing in PvP games, and we also talked about metagaming, right? Because inherently multiplayer games have a metagame, which single player games might have as well, but that metagame isn't something that can just constantly change, given that, you know, with players you have to consider strategies where people adapt. Whereas in a single player game, it's constant, it's static, as we've mentioned here in this Venn diagram. So you don't have to worry about, you know, the meta that you end up finding out like becoming a different thing over time. Unless I guess people discover new mechanics, right? And that is definitely a possibility, but it's not in the same way as it would be in a PvP game. We also talked about, of course, speedrunning, and I forgot to mention it when we were mentioning the synthesis of the difficulty punishment graph as well. But speedrunning has its own associated punishment, and speedrunning also has its own component of difficulty that is separate from how people would typically play a single player game. So yeah, that's what we covered in this episode. And of course, don't forget all the things that we talked about in part 1 of the difficulty, where we tried to establish some baseline for what difficulty was with execution versus knowledge, with the mental stack, the theory, with player interest being a factor in difficulty, and with the different components of the ability to discover knowledge in a game and apply that knowledge in the game, and how that can relate to the difficulty of that game or the perceived difficulty of that game. Yeah, I think that about covers everything. Oh, and speaking of which, Retrorage, I know you weren't here for the entirety of that part 1 episode. So did you have anything else to just add as like a last bit for the execution part of difficulty?
Execution. I hate it. Okay, here's what I mean by that. Let me, I learned from the Mr. Driver himself. You gotta clarify, and expand on your statement, right? You can't just say it's difficult.
Yeah.
It's like, I hate it, period.
Yeah.
Okay, here's what I mean. So I typically am bad gamer. Execution wise, I'm like, I don't want to sit there and practice in my video game. When I go play a video game, like if the practice isn't natural, I don't want to do it. Right, which is why I'm not a very good fighting game player. Right, but anyways, which is why Sam Show is my favorite fighting game. Anyway, what do I mean by that? Like, I would rather have difficulty come from the decision making of the game, right? Like what you decide to do and like the macro part of the game than micro elements of the game, right? Because I love FPS. I love like the tactic of FPS. But no matter how good you are at the tactics, if you can't point click their head, you're trash. None of the tactics will work unless you fundamentally can complete the point and click on their head, right? I can flank them with my amazing strategy, but if I shoot them and I miss and they flick and I get headshot instantly, like my tactic mattered not my tactics when I cannot execute the micro, right? When I cannot have the execution, right? So, that's why like Sam Show, it's like, okay, I made all these macro element decisions, and like because the execution is not that hard in that game, I can do the thing that I like to do, which is macro decision making, right?
Hmm.
versus being bottlenecked by micro. In my opinion, I think micro will always be the bottleneck for games of high, like with this, the raw execution. Like FPSs will always be bottlenecked by can you point and click their head, right?
Hmm.
Like you can't get around it. If you can't do that, you're done. Your career in that game is done. Unless you become like a coach or something. Your career as a player, it's over, right? So that's my only point. Same thing with fighting games. You can't do the combo or whatever execution check is required. It's too bad, right? Your body. So I typically avoid games like that. I don't like, which is why I'm not an advanced speedrunner either, dude. I just things like that where I'm like, okay, you gotta sit down and practice the micro execution check. It couldn't be me. Couldn't be me. Unless it
Then
comes
why don't you?
naturally.
Oh, sorry. Then why don't you enjoy games like that Ross enjoy, like not
Oh,
RTS, but like
Factorio?
Factorial,
Factorio.
Civilization, yeah, the
Where you can
Forest
sit
game.
down and relax and number go up. That
Yeah,
okay, so that's like a personal preference kind of thing. All right, that has nothing to do with the game. Its games are good, but like it's just a personal pet peeve, and like I like it goes against my principles in life. So like I really don't like those games. Right? And that has nothing to do with the gameplay. Right? All right, you know what? It has everything to do with the gameplay because it like relates to those principles that I strongly disagree with. But that's a whole nother topic. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, execution. I typically want avoid those things unless it's natural. Like if it's like platformers or like natural execution, in my opinion. Yeah, you know what? Let me retract a bunch of my statements. It's when execution is multiplayer. There we go. Now I'm getting to the real grinding. Like I can play as many FPS games single player and have a great time, but when it becomes multiplayer, dude, that's when I start. The sweat starts getting on my head. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Self-discovery happening in the process, right, guys? Listen to the Mr. Driver here when he says, elaborate on your statements because you can find something new about yourself, just like I did right here, happening real time. I
Yeah.
don't really have a problem with execution. I only have a problem with it when it's in multiplayer games. You know what
Yeah.
I'm saying?
this is like your version of it's not kosher, but in video games, right?
Self-discovery right there, just by expanding my statement of I hate it. There you go. Real life example for you guys. Spot
Yeah.
on 4K. If every Redditor could do this on r/Metroidvania and find the same self-discovery that I just did from clarifying what they're talking about with, open eyes, then we'd have a better world. World peace would be solved if r/Metroidvania became greater critical thinkers.
Indeed. All right, fraufraw, did you have anything that you wanted to add to the synthesis?
No, I think I've said my piece and I'm content with it.
Okay. Yeah. So last thing I'll say before we close off. Again, I mentioned this in the synthesis already, but the thing I want people to take away from this is that difficulty is such similar to the word friction. Difficulty is such, or something being difficult is honestly not getting at much. If someone is asking, is Nine Souls difficult? And then someone just says yes, like, like what? There's nothing you can really take away from that. But if you talk about things like Nine Souls requires you to do parries and it has strict parry timing, but actually, Nine Souls is much more lenient parry timing than X other game, and then you can mention that game, right? Or you can say Nine Souls doesn't have runbacks, right? Because every save point is next to the boss. Or you can even say that Nine Souls has some knowledge checks, but the ability to discover those knowledge checks is well within the means of what the game expects of you, right? I mean, obviously those things are long-winded compared just saying this game is difficult. But who are you helping with just saying this game is difficult? You're not really helping anyone. And also, someone saying a game is difficult unfortunately does require them to give background on the games they played and the games that they think are also difficult, which ends up being also not very helpful because then you have to investigate further into that what that person thinks of those games when they're not even related to the original game that
they
you're
tell
asking about.
you. They tell
Well,
you.
they
As
tell
a
you,
person
yeah.
who has 1,000 hours in all the From Software games, who've beaten it at level 1, I can say for certain that this game is difficult.
Dude, even then, I have to ask, oh, did you use summons? Did you play up line? Did you look up stuff when you were playing? Like, dude, I have to ask so much. And you just have to keep asking more and more as the more you learn about what that person's playing. And then you just get you get so detracted from what you're originally asking about the game. So,
Yeah.
oh, yeah. Did you want to say?
Yeah, the forever changing goalpost. I think
Yeah.
one of the biggest problem in modern gaming is that there are just way too many metrics, right? People want to see numbers like, oh, the completion time, oh my my MMR, etc. Oh, this is difficult, but it's not difficult enough, and oh, come on.
Yeah. Yep. I mean, yeah, obviously the things I'm suggesting here might be might be seen as unnecessary or verbose to some, but I mean well when I say this. Like, I generally do not feel like it's helpful just to say to someone like this game is difficult. Like, because there's just so many things you have to ask about why they thought it was difficult. And at that point, you might as well just mention the things about the game that actually matter to the person that you're talking to, like about like whether the game has long runbacks or whether the game encourages you to use the tools or whether you have to find them through a wiki. Like things like that end up informing more about the person you're talking to rather than just saying this game is difficult.
Yeah, you gotta like give the details. Don't just like don't be generic, right? Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Like for example, I find Portal to be difficult because it's actually physically difficult for me to play the game because I get motion sickness.
Right. No, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's an accessibility related thing. And I've heard that same sentiment echoed from other people I've talked to about first person games as well. Yeah. Simulation sickness is a big deal with that, right? But if fraufraw just says this game is difficult, like you're not even getting that sense from just someone saying it's difficult. When I say Silksong is difficult, it doesn't even mean what you think I mean by that. It means it was difficult for me to get through it because the game was so awful to play, right? And that's not something someone will get a sense of from just hearing me say that game is difficult. Well, maybe you probably will because you're hearing me say it, but that's besides the point. But I see people say so frequently and echo the sentiment that Silksong's difficult. But why do they think so? And then they start to mention the reasons why, and I'm like, okay, like that's like what every other game would probably encourage you to do is to engage with the game, right? But the tools that are in Silksong to overcome those things are so potent that like it feels like people are being a little bit like they're embellishing a little bit when they're talking about Silksong and its difficulty. Like obviously, again, difficulty is subjective, so I don't want to take away from people's experiences. People have different perceptions of certain things, but because they have different perceptions of certain things, why not just outline the things that are facts about the game? Like the game having runbacks is a fact or not, right? Or the game giving you save points next to the boss is a fact or not. Or the game encouraging you to use the tools in the game or needing like some wiki things to reach an ending is a fact or not. Like maybe saying facts about the game is not as fun as saying opinions. Like I love opinions as well. I'm an opinion lover, but at the end of the day, you're not really saying something helpful just by saying it's difficult or you found it difficult, So just some food for thought there. And let me know what you think about this. Do you think that a change to the approach is necessary? I actually made a Reddit thread some time ago, and I can pull it up here. I have open a Reddit comment from the runback thread. I can cover this in another podcast episode because it relates to the tired word of friction. But I want to talk about a post I made some time ago on r/Metrovania related to a change in approach being necessary to how we talk about difficulty. And the main takeaway I want people to get from this is that when we're talking about games being supposedly easy or hard, you want to make sure that it's clear what the person you're talking to you want to make sure it's clear that the person you're talking to would be able to understand what you mean by that. And obviously when you're talking to people on Reddit, they're not going to understand. When you're talking to your friends your friends probably have a good sense of the kinds of games you play and maybe your supposed skill level, right? In a game. Like I don't want to go there, but point being, they would probably understand much better when you say something is hard or easy than some random person on the internet. So keep that in mind when you're talking about difficulty in games. And no matter whether you think a different approach is necessary, it never hurts to have some more precision when you're talking to people. Never hurts. So with that, hope you all enjoyed listening to the episode. Thank you very much for listening or watching. Again, shout outs to all the people that have listened to the previous episodes as well. We've had a number of people give thoughtful comments on them, and whether you agreed with them or not, we appreciate all the thoughtful comments that you gave. This has been fraufraw and Retrorage and K-Drive. Thanks everyone for watching, and we hope to catch you on a future episode of Drivers Discord.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.